Chapter 398. A winding path that led to the mysterious elven forest. Passionate photo feast. Cereal, stop. Who are you? Shea hugged Ron, and Kay hugged Becerra. This time, the huntresses were even more stunned. They asked in astonishment, "You know Her Highness Princess Cilia? And Lord Elian?" Cilia was the daughter of the Elven Queen, the Princess of the Empire. No matter who it was, they had to respectfully address her as Her Highness Princess. Elian was the son of the Second Elder and held an important position in the Empire. Everyone in the Elven tribe knew the names of these two people, but they were not very famous outside because most of them stayed in the Elven forest. The huntresses naturally knew these people. For a moment, the huntress leader could not help but feel embarrassed. At this time, a huntress walked to the huntress leader's ear and whispered a few words. When the huntress heard this, her expression suddenly changed, and she glanced at Corbett. After a while, the huntress leader bit her lip, bowed deeply, and said, "So it is a powerhouse from the sacred domain that has graced us with your presence. The Elven tribe has neglected our guests, please do not take offense." Corbett smiled faintly. "It doesn't matter. May I ask if we can meet with your High Priestess Undine?" The huntress leader respectfully said, "I'm sorry, I don't have the authority to answer this question. But since it is a powerhouse from the sacred domain that has graced us with your presence, our Elven tribe will naturally have someone to receive you. Please wait a moment." It was possible to impersonate an old friend of the High Priestess, but it was impossible to impersonate a powerhouse from the sacred domain. According to the rules of the Elven tribe, if a powerhouse from the sacred domain came to the Elven forest, he would be treated as an honored guest. Naturally, there was a special organization and special people in charge of this matter. After learning that Corbett was a powerhouse from the sacred domain, the huntress leader was very clear that they no longer had the authority to handle this matter. A huntress left the team and ran to the nearest Elven village to report to their elders. Corbett and Shea looked at each other helplessly. All they could do was wait. Fortunately, they did not have to wait for long. After a while, an elf elder rushed over while panting. After understanding their request, he hesitated for a while and decided to let them in. On the riverbank, on the destroyed land, Tommy was still chattering about something, but Omega's expression had already become impatient. "Are you done?" Omega's face sank as she said coldly. She had just suffered a great defeat and was in a bad mood. It was one thing for this human to not be able to help her, but he actually abandoned her and fled. This wasn't the most infuriating part of her. And now, because she couldn't kill Ron, she couldn't avenge his father and was even blamed for it. The anger in Omega's heart unknowingly rose. "Omega, of course I'm not done. What I said is the truth. You were stalling for time just now." "That's right, you were stalling for time. If you directly killed him, wouldn't everything be fine? But you've been playing. What are you playing at? Isn't this situation caused by you? Wouldn't it have been better if you just killed him?" Tommy became more and more agitated as he spoke, and his voice also became louder. "Omega, I see that you have no intention of avenging my father at all. You're only doing it for yourself. Have you ever thought about me? You've already promised me." Tommy was so frustrated that he poured out all the dissatisfaction he had with Omega. "Shut up." Omega could no longer bear it. Her anger had reached a critical point. For a moment, a strong murderous aura seeped out from her body. Not long after, Omega turned into a huge Beaumont. Beaumont suddenly stretched out a hand and grabbed Tommy's collar and lifted him up. Tommy was frightened by the sudden attack. He lowered his head and just happened to see Omega's furious face. He kept struggling and said with a trembling voice, "Omega, you. What are you doing?" "What am I doing? You annoy me too much. I'm going to kill you." Omega roared as she opened her mouth to reveal her sharp teeth. "No one can order me to do anything. You're just a mere human, a lowly race. What qualifications do you have to order me? What do I have to tell you what I want to do?" Omega's face became ferocious. A trace of murderous intent shot out from her angry eyes. No. Don't. Tommy finally knew what he had done wrong. He was too complacent and forgot his own identity. He even forgot the identity of the woman in front of him. The woman in front of him was a tyrannical and cruel Beaumont. Usually, if he coaxed her well, there would be no problem. He could even make her obedient. But once he became complacent and ordered her around, the Beaumont's cruel and arrogant face would completely reveal itself. Tommy struggled with all his might, but Omega's hand was like an iron clamp, firmly holding him. At this time, Omega's hand had already pressed on Tommy's shoulder. No. Don't, Omega, I was wrong, okay? I beg you, don't kill me. Tommy immediately cried and begged for mercy. He hoped that Omega would let him go on account of their good relationship. Looking at the human man in front of her, Omega only felt an indescribable disgust. Thinking back to the past, she didn't even understand why she fell in love with this human man. No strength, weak, timid. Kay was trash, but at least he knew how to resist, even if he couldn't beat her. But this human man in front of her was worse than trash. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, he abandoned her and ran away. It's too late to beg for mercy now. You've already made me lose my patience. Omega gnashed her teeth and said. At this time, her hand moved and Tommy's begging voice came to an abrupt end. A huge amount of blood flew out like a fountain and sprayed all over the ground. It sprayed all over Omega's head and body. In just a moment, Tommy was torn into two halves. Omega stood there with a grim smile. Her hand held the two halves of Tommy's body. The bright red blood dripped down from the black fur, making her face even more ferocious. Chapter 399. Crash. The unconscious Ron was thrown into a moon well. Not long after, his body sank straight down. Blood flowed out from his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, dyeing the spring water in the well red. Library 56. The library of KH 56 was a strange and beautiful building. Beside him, there was nothing. In one night, Ron absorbed all the spring water in the moon well and finally recovered. Where am I? Ron couldn't help but scratch his head and ask. Shea smiled and said, You're in the elf forest, Ron. It was the elves who saved you. Elves? The image of the battle with Omega flashed through Ron's mind. For a moment, he couldn't react. How did he get involved with the elves again? After Becerra's explanation, Ron finally understood the whole story. He fiercely punched Kay and scolded with a smile, Good boy, you actually stepped into the sacred domain in one step. Why didn't such a good thing happen to me? Looks like I'll have to rely on you to protect me in the future. Kay scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. At this time, Aurora's figure appeared behind everyone. She first looked at Ron and then said lightly, Everyone, the elf tribe's high priestess Undine invites you, Undine, a divine realm expert. When they heard that they were going to meet this legendary divine realm expert, everyone's face showed a trace of unnatural expression. Kay also had a bitter face. He thought that this divine realm expert wouldn't tear him apart, right? In front of a divine realm expert, his sacred domain expert was just trash. Let's go. Since they invited us, let's go meet this legendary divine realm expert of the elves. Ron didn't think so much. He smiled and got up. With a slight flip of his palm, a black thread-like thing appeared. It was in his palm. Chapter 400. Aurora walked in front with a calm face. She didn't say a word, and no one knew what she was thinking. Ron was nervous, but he didn't dare to go forward and ask. The most awkward person here is she. Pornographic novels, she didn't even know what position she should be in. Are these the creatures called humans? Yes, it's so strange. Passing through small villages, it was very quiet and simple. Many elves hid in the houses and curiously poked their heads out, quietly looking at Ron and the others. Most of them had never seen humans in their lives. Some elven children whispered to each other. Unlike humans, elves didn't like bustling buildings. They advocated a natural life. Even their capital was only a relatively large village. The same houses, the same buildings, and the same simple. Ron curiously looked at everything in front of him. From the trees, houses, and bushes, little heads poked out, curiously looking at them as if they were monsters. Although the buildings in the elven forest were simple and crude, the natural scenery here was the most beautiful. Every mountain, every river, every blade of grass, and every tree was filled with spirit energy. Once one stepped into the elven forest and entered the inner village, one would feel as if they were in a fairyland. Ron didn't know if it was an illusion, but what made him feel strange was that there were some traces of destruction in the elven village here, as if there had been a war. He also saw some elves repairing the houses. Ron wanted to ask, but when he saw Aurora in front of him, he swallowed the words that were just about to come out of his mouth. So beautiful, just as they passed by an elven village, everyone's eyes couldn't help but light up, and they heard the sounds of praise. What appeared in front of them was a very beautiful lake. The blue lake sparkled, and the bottom could be seen. White fish swam around at the bottom of the lake, and a thin layer of fog floated on the surface of the lake. Such a beautiful scene immediately attracted everyone's attention. My grandmother didn't know what to do about the mirror of the Co-56 library. In order to maintain the seal, she has already consumed a lot of power. At this moment, Corbett suddenly asked, "Who is your chief elder, Keith?" Seeing Aurora looking at him in confusion, Corbett smiled and said, "What I mean is, it seems that there are several elders in each of your elven villages. What I don't understand is, he is also an elder, so what position does he have in the elven tribe?" Aurora hesitated for a moment before saying, "Our elven race has a council of elders as the core structure. Every elven village has a few elders who are jointly responsible for the affairs of the village, and the first among them is the Great Elder. However, Sir Keith is different. He is not the Great Elder of a village, but the Great Elder of the entire elf clan. He is ranked first among the elders of the elf clan, so he is called the Chief Great Elder. His power is second only to Her Majesty the Queen." Chapter 401. The group of people arrived in front of a dense forest. Aurora gently closed the forest and made a path. Remember, Jean gone in 1 second, and provide you with exciting novels to read. Grainweb, this was the path to the Forbidden Land, and it was also the place where the nature god Undine lived in seclusion. As her granddaughter, Aurora had naturally been here more than once. However, the Forbidden Land of the elf race was naturally not that easy to enter. Not long after they entered, a group of elves suddenly appeared from the ground and shouted, "Stop! This is the Forbidden Land of the elf race. No one is allowed to trespass." During this critical period, the Forbidden Land of the elf race naturally needed someone to protect it. However, Ron felt that it was very strange. Did the residents of a God Realm Master need someone to protect it? It felt more like surveillance. Aurora's face was still calm. "I'm looking for my granny." The leader was a Blood Elf Knight, and the other was a Dark Elf. They were the captain and vice-captain, respectively. The two of them looked at each other, and the Blood Elf Knight said, "You can go in." "But they can't." Aurora frowned, and a pornographic novel flashed past her eyes. There was a trace of unhappiness. "It's Granny who asked me to bring these humans to see her." "I already told you when we came out, is that so?" The other Dark Elf gently covered one of his eyes and used his other eye to sweep across Ron and the rest's faces. At this moment, he used the Eye of Truth. This magic could see through all illusions and disguises. When the Dark Elf Vice-Captain's eyes landed on Kay, he couldn't help but let out a soft and exclaimed, "There's actually a library 56 here." Rainie's eyes widened as she stared at Shea and Aurora. "So, aren't you two sisters?" Chapter 402. Things in the world were often so coincidental. No one would have thought that two completely unrelated people would suddenly connect. Moreover, they were sisters. The most embarrassing thing was that they actually fell in love with the same man at the same time. Underworld novel. Shea and Aurora looked at each other. The corners of their mouths twitched a few times, and they lowered their heads at the same time. The words sister and sister seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds, and they couldn't say it out loud. K56 was a bookstore monster, so he hurriedly said, Aurora, hurry up and greet them. This is your sister. This should be your sister, right? Undine glanced at Xiaojing. It seemed that Shea was slightly older. Aurora glanced at Shea, bit her lip, and lowered her head again. Her expression was complicated. The most awkward person here was undoubtedly Ron. His face was burning hot. He didn't expect Shea and Aurora to be sisters. The most troublesome thing was that one of them had slept with him. At this moment, Ron's head was about to explode. He couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in. For a moment, everyone was silent. No one spoke, and the atmosphere became extremely awkward. Undine sensed something. Her tone became serious, and she asked Aurora, What's wrong? What's going on? At this moment, Corbett paused for a moment, sighed, and glanced at Ron. Let me tell you about this. With that, he told them about the feud between Ron, Shea, and Aurora. Corbett didn't know about it. Most of it was told to him by Shea. However, Aurora didn't say anything after returning to the elf forest, so Undine didn't know much about it. She only knew that her granddaughter was bullied by a human. What? So it's you? Undine was angry even before she heard it. Wow, you stole Aurora's heart, and now you've hooked up with my other granddaughter. Undine was so angry that she couldn't help but pull out a dark green nature staff from her body. You're infuriating me. You scoundrel, I'll teach you a lesson today. Undine was so angry that she was dizzy. She waved the magic staff and was about to hit Ron's head. Corbett was shocked. Nini, don't. Grandma, don't hurt him, Aurora said anxiously. Aurora was fast, but a figure was faster than her. Grandma, it's all my fault. If you want to hit someone, hit me. It was Shea who spoke. She lowered her head sadly, not daring to meet Undine's murderous gaze. However, her tall body stood firmly in front of Ron. Becerra also stood in front of Ron like a chicken. Undine frowned and shouted coldly, Get out of the way! No. Shea, Aurora, and Becerra said in unison. The three women stood in front of Ron like protectors. They were shy but firm. This. Undine was stunned. Two of the three women were her granddaughters. She couldn't do it. She didn't know what to do now. Undine glanced at Ron. She saw Ron cowering in a corner like a wronged wife. She sighed in her heart. What was so good about this brat? All the outstanding girls were fighting to be the first to throw themselves at him. Two of them were her granddaughters. Undine cursed in her heart. She glanced at Corbett and saw a strange smile on his face. He wanted to laugh but couldn't. She got even angrier. Old man, are you going to do something about this? Corbett's face turned bitter when he heard that. How can I do something about this? Nini, you saw it too. If you really kill this brat, I think they will be angry with you for the rest of their lives. Of course, he was referring to Shea and Aurora. Undine was at her wits' end. She glared at Corbett. This brat is just like you. Both are playboys. Corbett could only give a bitter smile. Undine glanced at Ron again. She muttered, What's so good about this brat? Why does everyone treat him like a treasure? Undine's face turned cold. Ron. You're called Ron, right? You've seen the situation. How do you plan to solve it? Ron shook his head. He said something that made Undine go crazy. I don't know. You don't know? Undine's anger flared up again. Heavens! You actually said you don't know? To think that my two granddaughters were willing to die for you. You actually said you don't know. She suddenly pointed at Shea and Aurora. Tell me, which one do you like? I like both. Ron was forced to the point that he had no other choice. He could only choke out this sentence. No, you can, Undine said resolutely. Our elf clan is a clan that values loyalty. Don't bring your human ways here. You can only choose one out of the two. Tell me, which one do you like? I. Being pressured by Undine's aura, Ron stammered and was unable to speak. In front of an angry expert of the god's domain, how could he get away with it so easily? Ron looked at Shea and then at Aurora. The three of them looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with eagerness. You can only choose one. Ron's heart was in a dilemma. He liked Aurora and also liked Shea. Even he himself didn't know that from the beginning to the end, he had always kept a place for Shea in his heart. As if seeing Ron's helplessness, Shea gritted her teeth, turned her head and said, Grandma, this is actually all my fault. Ron and I have always been a misunderstanding. I won't fight with my sister. I quit. Shea's heart was in a mess. Her words were also intermittent. She didn't even know what she was saying. However, everyone understood the three words that she said. That was, I quit. When she said this, Shea's face was filled with disappointment. Aurora also said, Grandma, I actually don't like Ron either. Before Aurora could finish her words, wah, she cried out and threw herself into Undine's arms. Shea's expression was also gloomy. Undine comforted Aurora in a low voice and glared fiercely at Ron. It's all because of you. Her gaze fell on Becerra and coldly said, I think this woman's relationship with you is not ordinary. Ron could only nod his head. In front of Undine, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Undine's aura was too strong. Moreover, this aura was completely directed at him. It was like a mountain pressing down on him. Humans are indeed all bad. Undine sneered. She also scolded Corbett. Corbett's face was filled with helplessness. He also knew that it was time for him to speak. He coughed lightly and said, Nini, I think, let's leave the young people's matters to them. We're all so old, and it's time for us to let go. It's not good to get involved. You see, the most crucial part of the matter was Aurora. As long as Aurora nodded her head, then the matter would be resolved. What Corbett meant was to let Aurora make the choice. But how could this matter be so easy? The tradition of monogamy in the elf tribe had been deeply rooted in people's hearts. Aurora's heart couldn't come around for a while. You mean, if Shea and Aurora both like him and don't want to back out, then you want me to marry both my granddaughters to this guy? Undine's eyes widened as she asked rhetorically. Corbett didn't say anything and only nodded his head lightly. Undine sighed in her heart. She looked at the determined Shea and Aurora. No matter how unwilling she was, she could only choose to accept. No. I can't let you get away with it so easily. At this moment, Undine stood up and stared at Ron sternly. She said coldly, Ron, I don't care about you humans. According to our elf tribe's tradition, it's impossible to marry more than one woman as a wife. At this moment, her tone softened a little. But since Shea and Aurora both like you, I have nothing to say. As long as they like you, I can give you a way out. Really? When Ron heard this, his eyes lit up. He liked both of them and didn't want to give up on either one. Shea also stood there in a daze. Her face was filled with joy. Only Aurora's expression was complicated. Don't be happy too early. Undine laughed coldly. If you want to marry my two beautiful granddaughters, you have to pass my test. Moreover, this test can only be completed by you alone. Ron nodded his head and took a deep breath. His eyes shone with confidence. I'm not afraid of any challenge. Undine smiled. Very good. Then you go and prepare. My test isn't that simple. Ron nodded his head and walked to a place not far away. He sat down on a large rock and calmed his heart as he prepared to receive Undine's test. Ron felt that as a god domain expert, Undine's test wouldn't be that simple. What do you want? After Ron left, Corbett asked directly. Undine smiled. Nothing much. I just want to see his strength. I also want to see what kind of ability this fellow that my 2 granddaughters love so much has. When Shea and Aurora heard this, both of them immediately blushed. Pornographic novel this. Corbett smiled embarrassedly. You won't do anything to him, right? Rest assured, I definitely won't kill him. Undine smiled and said. When everyone heard this, they felt relieved. Shea, Aurora and Becerra all breathed a sigh of relief. But, at this time, Undine slowly said, although there won't be any danger to his life, he still needs to be taught a lesson. Losing an arm or a leg is unavoidable. Let him remember that he dared to seduce my 2 granddaughters. He will have to pay the price. When everyone heard this, their originally relieved hearts were once again tensed up, and their hair stood on end. Corbett only felt a chill on his neck. In the past, he and Undine were both sacred domain experts. But now, Undine had stepped into the god domain. If they really fought, he, a sword saint, might not be able to last more than a few rounds in front of a nature mage god like Undine. Undine smiled and slowly stepped into the field. Are you ready? Undine asked. Ron opened his eyes and raised his head. His pitch-black eyes were filled with determination. Replying to my lady, I am ready. According to the customs of the Noah continent, all experts in the sacred domain and above were respectfully addressed as my lady. With Undine's strength, even experts in the sacred domain had to respectfully address her as my lady, let alone Ron. Chapter 403. Ron took a deep breath and slowly walked into the field. He took out the orange-red legendary staff from the space bag at his waist. Bookbag Grainweb. Undine made a sound of surprise. Her gaze fell on the legendary staff in Ron's hand. Orange-red, a legendary weapon. No enchanter in the Noah continent can make this kind of weapon. You really have some skills. She smiled faintly. However, if you only have a good weapon without strength, then it's meaningless. Undine glanced at Ron. My test naturally won't be that simple. Although I won't fight with you directly, you must defeat it. Who is this it? A question mark appeared in everyone's mind. Undine smiled. Suddenly, her face became serious. In the surrounding space, a cold wind suddenly blew. The wind is blowing, Ron murmured. He knew that this was not wind, but a vortex formed by Undine's powerful power. Ka-ka-ka, a sound like the friction of a tree breaking was heard. It was especially ear-piercing, as if something terrible had been activated. Ron's heart trembled. He looked around and found the source of the sound. He saw a tree quickly fall, and then it began to shrink and shrink again. Under the entanglement of the light green power, the tree quickly turned into a human shape. It had a human face, facial features, and arms. What made Ron shocked was that this human-shaped tree was actually wearing armor. The tree warrior opened its mouth wide, and the black holes were like 2 eyes. The leaves on its body turned yellow and then fell crazily. The human-shaped tree paused for a moment and then walked quickly towards Ron. It was like a normal person, and its speed was not slow at all. What is this? A humanoid creature that he had never seen before was standing in front of an erotic novel. In front of him, Ron's heart could not help but tighten. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Withered Tree Guardian. Grandma actually summoned Deadwood Guardians. Ron is in danger. Aurora couldn't help but feel nervous and she shouted, Ron, be careful. These are the withered tree guards that Granny summoned with the force of nature. His battle prowess is extremely powerful. When Ron heard this, he became even more vigilant. If even someone as powerful as Aurora could warn him to be careful, it meant that the withered tree guardians were not as easy to deal with as he had imagined. The test of a realm of the gods is indeed not simple. Ron thought to himself, his palms slightly sweating. Undine glared at Aurora in dissatisfaction. You haven't even married into the family yet, and you're already thinking of helping him. Everyone says that girls side with their husbands, and this isn't false at all." This sentence made Aurora's face turn red. She no longer dared to speak carelessly. After teaching Aurora a lesson, Undine's gaze turned to Ron. She smiled and said, "Ron, as a test for you, your opponent is it." In other words, Undine would not personally take action. Of course, if she took action, Ron would have nothing to do with it. However, if you can't even defeat it, at this point, Undine paused, and her face darkened. "Then you can forget about seeing my granddaughters in the future, including Shea and Aurora. I won't let my granddaughters marry a good-for-nothing. Do you understand?" Ron took a deep breath and nodded. His eyes shone with strong confidence. "Understood." Undine smiled. "Very good. You can begin at any time." To Undine, this kind of battle did not require any preparation at all. She decided to give Ron the opportunity to attack first. Standing in front of the powerful withered tree guardian, Ron suddenly felt that he was extremely small. This natural creature called the withered tree guardian was simply too tall. It was at least 6 to 7 meters tall, and its entire body was covered in leaf-like armor. Tree roots coiled around it like protruding muscles. Taking a deep breath, Ron calmly raised the undead bone staff. The soul energy in his body crazily surged out as if it had substance. A low voice reverberated in the forest. Not long after, a large number of heavily armored skeleton warriors scrambled to climb out of the ground. There were at least 10 of them. Interesting. Seeing this, Undine was not flustered. She smiled faintly. "Attack!" Ron was like a commander, ordering the skeleton warriors to madly charge forward. He had summoned the skeleton warriors with deep meaning. In a situation where the opponent's strength was unknown, a probing attack was the best choice. The skeleton warriors opened their mouths wide and uttered a few simple syllables. Like solid wood, they pounced towards the 7 to 8 meter tall withered tree guardian. The withered tree guardian was originally like a block of wood, standing there in a daze. But when the skeleton warriors pounced in front of it, it suddenly moved. It swung its massive claw, which looked like a human hand, and a gust of wind blew through the air. A few skeleton warriors couldn't dodge in time and were sent flying into the air. They crashed heavily onto the ground and disintegrated, turning into black smoke and disappearing. Ron was shocked. This guy is so strong. It was said that the strength of a creature was directly proportional to its body. This law was very well interpreted here. The 7 to 8 meter tall deadwood guardians punched and kicked, and very quickly, the skeleton warriors were beaten to a pulp. Boom! 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 One by one, the skeleton warriors were sent flying. One of them flew directly towards Ron. Ah! Ron jumped in fright and immediately dodged. The skeleton warrior brushed past his scalp and slammed into a tree behind him. It disappeared before falling to the ground. Ron was dumbfounded. This guy's strength is too terrifying. In reality, not only was the withered tree guardian terrifying, but its defense was also very strong. The skeleton warrior's greatsword was able to cut into the withered tree guardian's body, but the weapon seemed to be stuck in the tree and couldn't be pulled out. Just as it was pulled out, the withered tree guardian's giant claws arrived. What a powerful withered tree guardian! Shea was dumbstruck. The strength of this summoned creature was beyond her expectations. Shea thought that even if she were to face this withered tree guardian, she wouldn't be able to gain an advantage. Seeing that Ron was completely at a disadvantage, Basara couldn't help but worry. Ron will be fine, right? Don't worry. Aurora's expression was very calm. Although Granny's withered tree guardian is very strong, Ron hasn't used his true strength yet. The show has only just begun. Just as Aurora said, the show had only just begun. After a round of probing attacks, Ron had a rough idea of the withered tree guardian's strength. It was strong, but its defense was equally strong and strange. Looks like I'll have to change my method of dealing with it. Ron thought. Skeleton mages. Ron pondered deeply. In this situation, skeleton mages that used long-range attacks were the best choice. Ron chanted in a low voice, summoning a large number of skeleton mages. They raised their staffs at the withered tree guardian, their eyes emitting a faint green light. Undine's brows furrowed. At that moment, countless magic bullets lit up in the skeleton mage's hands. Their white bone-like hands waved lightly, and the magic bullets rained down on the withered tree guardian. Boom, boom, boom. The magic bullets exploded like cannonballs, and very quickly, the withered tree guardian was blasted open. At that moment, Ron had also grasped its weakness. It was that its magic resistance was slightly weak, and its movement was slow. Come on, kill it for me. Ron waved his hand, and the skeleton mage's magic bullets blanketed the sky. In an instant, the withered tree guardian was drowned in smoke and dust. Come on! Becerra, Rainey, and the others shouted crazily, cheering for Ron. Shea and Aurora didn't dare to be so ostentatious, but expressions of joy for Ron surfaced on their faces. Corbett smiled, a look of admiration in his eyes. Ron had obtained an overwhelming victory. He let out a sigh of relief, and a relaxed expression appeared on his face. It seems like this withered tree guardian isn't that impressive after all. This kid is indeed quite capable. Those skeleton-like magicians, especially the fire element magicians, are the nemesis of my withered tree guardian. Undine thought to herself. At that moment, a smile appeared on her face. She picked up the dark green nature magic staff and waved it lightly. Like a conductor, a light green nature energy spread out. Caw-caw-caw in the billowing smoke and dust, a familiar ear-piercing sound could be heard again. It was like metal grinding against metal. Aurora's expression changed drastically as she listened to the sound quietly. Not good. The bombardment finally stopped, and the smoke and dust began to disperse slowly. Is it over? Ron swallowed a mouthful of saliva and looked nervously at the dispersing smoke and dust. Suddenly, 2 red dots appeared in the smoke and dust. It was a pair of crazed and bloodthirsty eyes. What? Ron jumped in fright. He saw that the withered tree guardian's aura suddenly changed and became berserk. At the same time, its body was constantly changing. Caw-caw-caw, the sound continued to ring out, and the withered tree guardian's body began to grow bigger and taller. Its originally grayish-green body also turned into a dark black color, looking like hard iron. This is a withered tree guardian. Grandma actually summoned a withered tree guardian. Aurora was shocked, and her face revealed a nervous expression. If the withered tree guardian's appearance was to test Ron's strength, then the withered tree guardian would be the real test. At this moment, Aurora recalled that Grandma had said that although she wouldn't kill Ron, she would make him lose an arm or a leg. It wasn't a lie. She really wanted to teach Ron a lesson. At this moment, Aurora began to worry about Ron. This withered tree guardian seems to be a little bigger than the withered tree guardian. Is it very powerful? Shea was also worried, and she couldn't help but ask Aurora. It's very powerful. Aurora nodded, glanced at Shea, and added, very powerful. Ron has to be careful this time. This was the first time the two sisters had spoken to each other after knowing each other's identity. The purpose of this conversation was also for Ron. The withered tree guardian finally finished its transformation. Under Undine's force of nature, it became a withered tree guardian. The withered tree guardian was twice as big as the withered tree guardian. Its body was over 10 meters tall, and when it stood in front of Ron, it was as tall as a building. Its body was as black as iron, and its eyes were crimson red. The withered tree guardian took a step forward, and a powerful aura rushed towards Ron. Even the ground trembled slightly. Chapter 404. After a slight pause, the withered tree warrior moved in the next moment. Its right leg stomped on the ground, and its body sped up. It charged forward like a cannonball, its speed more than double that of the withered tree warrior. Go to GrayNet whenever you see an entertaining picture. What? Ron was shocked. He didn't expect the withered tree warrior to be so fast. He immediately retreated, and at the same time, the skeleton sorcerers began their counterattack. The withered tree warrior's target wasn't Ron, but the skeleton sorcerers who were casting spells. The withered tree warrior charged towards the skeleton sorcerers. The withered tree warrior's magic resistance was clearly much higher than the withered tree guardians. These low-level spells barely dealt any damage to them. Even the skeleton hero's heavy greatsword only left a shallow mark on the withered tree warrior's body. The withered tree warrior's defense was too insane. The withered tree warrior charged towards the skeleton sorcerers like a ferocious tiger. It raised its huge, hard fists and smashed them down. With its iron fists flying and its huge feet stomping, the 10-meter-tall withered tree warrior was like an invincible giant in the eyes of the skeleton sorcerers. Soon, Ron's skeleton army was torn apart. With the appearance of the powerful withered tree warrior, the situation took a turn for the worse. Everyone began to worry. At the same time, the withered tree warrior began to target Ron. It took a huge step forward and arrived in front of Ron in a few steps. It raised its fist and smashed it down. Ron, be careful. Basara, Rainy, Shea, and Aurora cried out anxiously. The huge fist came, and Ron could only use the fog spell to escape. The withered tree warrior's heavy fist smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. That was close. Ron had a lingering fear. Although he had escaped, the situation was still not good. At this time, the withered tree warrior attacked again. Ron could only dodge again, and the fist brushed past his body. Ron! Aurora could not help but worry about Ron's safety. In order to test Ron, her grandmother had actually summoned the withered tree warriors. To him, this was not a small challenge. The withered tree warrior's strength was equivalent to a master-level powerhouse. Undine smiled. That's right, her so-called test was originally just the withered tree guardians, but after seeing Ron's strength, she changed her mind and summoned the withered tree warriors, directly increasing the difficulty. Hee, who asked you to be so arrogant? Now, you're being chased all over the place by my withered tree warriors. Undine smiled proudly. Brother Ron, quickly fight back, quickly defeat it. Rainy stomped her feet and shouted loudly. Damn it, if it were me, I would have sent it flying with a single punch. Kay raised her small fist angrily. Don't underestimate this small fist. Now, Ron could already become a golden Beaumont with the strength of the sacred domain. In the past, when he had no strength, it was always Ron who protected him. Now, he really hoped to be able to protect Ron. However, this battle was related to Undine's test for Ron. He could not interfere. Damn it, dodging like this is not a solution. Black Knight, no, but this guy is too strong. I'm afraid even the Black Knight is not its match. Ron immediately rejected the Black Knight. His mind turned quickly. Looks like I have to summon the Terror Knight. He gritted his teeth and raised his soul energy to the highest level. In the shining hexagram, the huge Terror Knight in heavy armor appeared in front of everyone. With a heavy body and a sharp long sword, the Terror Knight stood quietly in front of Ron like a guardian knight. Under the cold mask, it exuded an aura of death. Seeing the sudden appearance of the Terror Knight, Undine's eyes showed a rare trace of seriousness. The undead creature that appeared this time is not simple at all. Pornographic novels, the withered tree warrior's red eyes shone brightly. Unafraid of the aura of death on the Terror Knight, the withered tree warrior threw a punch at it. Even though the Terror Knight's body was huge, it still paled in comparison to the withered tree warrior, which was more than 10 meters tall. Facing the withered tree warrior's huge punch, it wisely chose to defend. It raised its heavy shield high and blocked the withered tree warrior's attack. Boom! The force of nature and the aura of death collided with each other, releasing a strong aura. The battle between the two summoned creatures had begun in an instant. The two big fellows engaged in an intense melee on the flat ground. When the two forces collided, huge sparks burst out. The sound spread, and the surrounding people's eardrums started to hurt. One was strong and heavy, while the other's defense and attack could be said to be perfect. Who would be the final victor between the two? This scene filled everyone's hearts with shock. They didn't think that Ron's summoned creature would be able to fight evenly with Undine's summoned creature. The battle continued, and a large amount of dust rose. Some people had no choice but to retreat far away to make space. The battle between the Terror Knight and the Withered Tree Warrior became even more intense. "This brat is a bit difficult to deal with." Undine frowned. She had already raised the Withered Tree Warrior's strength to the highest level, but it still couldn't do anything to Ron. The terrifying Skeleton Knight riding the Burning Bone Horse was too strong. The Withered Tree Warrior alone wouldn't be able to defeat it so easily. A green light flashed in the Terror Knight's eyes. Like a demon from hell, its body suddenly burst into flames. It raised its devilishly curved longsword high up and viciously slashed at the Withered Tree Warrior. Boom! A black light flashed, and the Withered Tree Warrior's arm was chopped off by the Terror Knight's devilishly huge longsword. In an instant, the Withered Tree Warrior's fighting strength was greatly reduced. In terms of attack and defense, the Terror Knight was still superior. Victory! Basara and Rainey saw the situation and immediately cheered. "Don't be happy too early." A cold voice came from the side. Aurora's face was solemn, and there wasn't a trace of happiness on her face. Basara and Rainey's eyes flashed with confusion. As expected, after a short moment, a green light flashed, and the Withered Tree Warrior's chopped-off arm was immediately healed. "I knew it!" Ron swore in his heart. These natural-type summoned creatures had top-notch recovery abilities. Thorns. At this time, the Withered Tree Warrior obviously changed its battle strategy. It clenched its fists, and countless sharp thorns suddenly grew from its body. Each of the thorns stood up like a sharp sword, and the sharp and hard thorns protected its entire body like armor. Thorns was a natural-type magic skill that could be used by the Withered Tree Warrior. Its function was to increase its defense, and it could also reflect a portion of the attack. The Withered Tree Warrior that used the Thorns spell was even more difficult to deal with. The Terror Knight's attacks hurt it, but it also hurt itself. The Withered Tree Warrior's disadvantageous situation was slowly turned around, and the Terror Knight was completely at a disadvantage. Entangling Roots. The Withered Tree Warrior released its natural-type magic again. This time, the Terror Knight wasn't so lucky. It was tightly entangled by countless roots that suddenly sprouted from the ground. The Terror Knight struggled with all its might, and its huge sword chopped off many of the roots that looked like tree root. However, each root was as thick as a thigh, and there were countless of them. Every time one was chopped off, another would grow out. The Terror Knight's struggle was futile. At this time, its feet left the ground, and it was tightly entangled, unable to move. Everyone's hearts were in their throat. They knew that this time Ron was going to lose. Ron turned pale with fright. At this time, he finally saw clearly that those root-like things were actually the Withered Tree Warrior's feet. At this time, the Withered Tree Warrior's feet were directly inserted into the ground, and countless roots shot towards him through the ground. Shadowmist. Ron could only use this undead magic to escape. However, this time, his movements were seen through by Undine. A root had already wrapped around his arm. Break it! Ron was still relatively calm. With a flash in his hand, a sharp bone spike appeared, and he cut off the roots that were wrapped around his arm. At the same time, he immediately summoned the gargoyle and flew into the air. Ron knew that in a situation where he didn't know when those terrifying roots would appear on the ground, the only way out was to fly. Ron was very fast, but Undine was even faster. Just as the gargoyle left the ground, a few roots suddenly shot up from the ground and firmly entangled the gargoyle's feet, forcibly dragging it down from the sky. After a short moment, Ron and his gargoyle were wrapped up by countless roots like dumplings. I've lost. Ron also knew that the situation was hopeless. He could only admit his defeat. From the beginning to the end, Undine didn't even make a move. All her movements were done by the withered tree warrior. Ron knew that he had lost, and lost completely. He originally wanted to use the sacred domain Archmage Phalon, but after thinking about it, he gave up. Manipulating corpses wasn't something to be proud of in the eyes of the people of the Noah continent. Moreover, Phalon's magic didn't belong to him. He didn't want to be looked down upon by Undine. A win was a win, and a loss was a loss. Ron was very straightforward about this. Since he had lost, he had to face it. A sigh came from afar. Everyone's eyes were filled with pity. Shea and Aurora were even more nervous. They didn't know how their grandmother would deal with Ron. Undine smiled and waved her hand. The roots that were wrapped around Ron and the Terror Knight all retreated. The terrifyingly powerful withered tree warrior also disappeared. Ron sighed and also let the Terror Knight disappear. He quietly walked in front of Undine and bowed sincerely. "I'm sorry, Lady Undine. I've disappointed you. I didn't pass your test." Corbett also quickly walked over. He looked at Ron and pleaded for him. "Nini, Ron has already done his best. He's not weak either. You see." Shea and Aurora looked at each other. They had already decided that no matter how their grandmother dealt with Ron, they would stand by Ron's side. Undine smiled and looked Ron up and down. Her eyes were full of praise. "It's not easy to have such strength at such a young age. What's even more incredible is that strange and powerful necromancy magic of yours. In time, you will definitely shine." At this point, Undine paused for a moment and smiled. "Congratulations, you've passed the test." Chapter 405. That's great. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard that. Grainweb at this moment, Shea and Aurora seemed to have thought of something. Swoosh, their faces turned red. Especially pornographic novels. It was Aurora. Her face darkened. Undine looked at Shea and then at Aurora. How could she not understand what was going on? She smiled and said, "Your future is up to you. Ron, although you've passed the test, it only means that you have the right to pursue my granddaughter. Whether you can truly move them or not, it's up to you in the end." Ron nodded heavily. "I understand." Undine smiled. She walked towards Co-50SXS Mira. Undine retracted her gaze and nodded. She followed Dobin to the side and came to a moon well. Ron noticed that there were many moon wells here. Many moon wells were empty, and only a few moon wells were still full of moon spring water. Undine took a deep breath and put her hand into the moon well. At the same time, she closed her eyes. The surface of the moon well emitted a white fog. Not long after, the moon spring water in the moon well disappeared. It had all been absorbed by Undine. "It's done." At this moment, Undine opened her eyes. After absorbing the moon spring water in a few moon wells, she became radiant. Her magical power had also recovered by more than half. However, the trace of fatigue on her face still lingered. Dobin said, "Fortunately, there are moon wells. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." "High Priestess, has your magical power recovered?" Undine smiled. "My magical power has recovered by more than half. However, my physical strength can't be recovered in a short period of time." Like Ron, although Undine could replenish her magical power, her physical strength couldn't be recovered so easily. Dobin nodded and sighed. "The moon spring water in the moon well is almost empty. We can't even replenish our magical power anymore. No, for the sake of the elves, I have to let the elders come up with a decision today." Dobin said firmly. Please go to Grainweb to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 406. Stamina. Ron muttered to himself and exchanged glances with Rainey beside him. He nodded. It seemed like it was time to do something for the elves. Underworld novel, Grainweb. He took a step forward and handed over the few bottles of stamina potion he had in his space bag. "What's this?" Undine took it and asked curiously. Ron smiled and said, "This is a stamina potion. When you're exhausted, drink it and you'll recover a lot of stamina." "What? You actually have stamina potions?" Undine held the white bottle in her hand, half in disbelief. "Where did you get this? Could it be?" She originally thought that it was a dimensional store. Unexpectedly, Rainey puffed out her chest and proudly said, "I concocted it." "You're a pharmacist?" Undine was extremely surprised to hear that. She didn't expect this human girl to know how to concoct potions. One had to know that pharmacists were a profession that everyone in the Noah continent wanted to recruit. Pornographic novels. Once the potion entered her mouth, Undine knew that it was real. She only felt a warm current rising from her stomach, and her stamina was slowly recovering. "The effect is not bad," Undine couldn't help but exclaim. Just then, a large group of people walked over from afar. "Elder Keith! Elder Keith!" The elves saw him and bowed one after another. Undine frowned. "Why is he here?" The person who came was the Elven clan's chief, Elder Keith. He had the blood elf bloodline of the Elven clan. He had a head full of long golden hair that was combed neatly behind his head. He was about 56 centimeters tall. "Mara, this strange beast from the realm of the gods, has more advantages than disadvantages for us elves." Chapter 407. Everyone fell silent. Keith was right. The chimera was a special existence in the elven forest. They shouldn't kill it directly. They should at least investigate the fact. However, the chimera was too powerful. Other than Undine, there was no one else who could deal with it. It was no wonder the elves were so afraid. "Take a look. Grain web." No one said anything. Even some elders agreed. At this time, the most important person spoke. "You're right, but—" Undine raised her head and looked at Keith. She said calmly, "There's no time. The seal won't last long. I've already absorbed all the moon water in the moonwell. If the chimera attacks the seal again, the consequences will be unimaginable." Everyone was moved by Undine's words. Many of the members of the Elder Council, who had originally agreed with the idea, began to ponder. At this time, an elf coughed and said, "I think the High Priestess is too worried. The moon water will be restored the next night." "Haha, it can't be so coincidental." Undine looked over. It was a blood elf elder she didn't recognize. She asked, "Who are you?" Keith smiled and introduced, "High Priestess, this is the new 9th Elder Waldron. He hasn't been in office for a month, so you don't know him yet." Waldron quickly bowed to the High Priestess. "High Priestess." Waldron smiled and bowed deeply. He was no more than 30 years old and was quite handsome. He already had the strength of the sacred domain at such a young age. Many female elves were secretly in love with him. However, he was still unmarried. Seeing Waldron's smile, Undine frowned. For some reason, she felt that this new 9th Elder's smile was a little sinister. "The new 9th Elder? Where's the original Elder Weiss?" Undine muttered. She felt that something was wrong. Since when was there a new Elder? 9th Elder Weiss was a green elf like her. He was a powerful dragon druid who could transform into a powerful wyvern. He had always been on good terms with Undine. Keith smiled and said proudly, "Elder Weiss broke the elven law. I have already locked him up. His duties and authority as an elder will be temporarily exercised by Waldron." "Broke the law?" Undine was shocked. What law did he break? Keith glanced at Undine. He moved his mouth and said, "Corruption. Pornographic novels embezzlement?" Undine was shocked. Elder Weiss actually embezzled? In Undine's impression, the chubby Wes had always been honest and easygoing. He was always smiling all day long. Undine refused to believe that he would be corrupt. "That's right. Elder Weiss has always been on good terms with me, but who would have thought that he would do such a thing?" Sigh. You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. Keith sighed with a pained expression on his face. Great Elder Keith. That's enough. Second Elder Dobin couldn't take it anymore. He jumped out and retorted, "There's no conclusion on Elder Weiss's matter. We lack the most crucial evidence. Everything is just a suspicion. The big hat of corruption can't be pinned on him yet." Dobin and Weiss were old friends, so he had to speak up here. Looking at the red-faced Dobin, Keith didn't panic. He smiled and said, Elder Dobin, I know that. That's why I let Waldron take over temporarily. Once it's clear that Elder Weiss is innocent, he'll naturally return to his position as an elder. I'd be a fool to believe you." Looking at Keith's smiling face, Dobin thought. He gritted his teeth and wanted to punch him. This guy's words were fake. If you really believed him, he would sell you out. With Elder Weiss's temper, even if it wasn't clear in the end, he wouldn't have the face to continue being an elder. Great Elder Keith, Elder Weiss's matter must be investigated thoroughly. If there's no concrete evidence, I hope to clear his name. Ever since Undine left the KH-56 library, she didn't have any playmate. Today, she suddenly had so many friends. She was overjoyed. Go to GrainWeb to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 408. Everyone fell silent. Keith was right. The Chimera was a special existence in the Elven Forest. They shouldn't kill it directly. They should at least find out the truth. However, the Chimera was too powerful. Other than Undine, no one else could deal with it. It was no wonder the elves were so afraid. Bookbag GrainWeb. No one spoke. Even some elders agreed. At this time, the most important person spoke. "You're right, but—" Undine raised her head and looked at Keith. She said calmly, "There's no time. The seal won't last for long. I've already absorbed all the moon water in the moonwell. If the Chimera attacks the seal again, the consequences will be unimaginable." Everyone was moved by Undine's words. Many of the members of the Elder Council, who had originally agreed with the idea, began to ponder. At this time, an elf coughed and said, "I think the High Priestess is too worried. The moon water will be restored the next night." "Haha, it can't be so coincidental." Undine looked over. It was a blood elf elder she didn't recognize. She asked, "Who are you?" Keith smiled and introduced, "High Priestess, this is the new 9th Elder Waldron. He hasn't been in office for a month, so you don't know him yet." Waldron quickly bowed to the High Priestess. "High Priestess." Waldron smiled and bowed deeply. He was not even 30 years old and was quite handsome. He already had the strength of the sacred domain at such a young age. Many female elves secretly admired him, but he was still unmarried. Seeing Waldron's smile, Undine frowned. She didn't know why, but she felt that this new 9th Elder's smile was a little evil. The new 9th Elder? Where's the original Elder Weiss? Undine muttered. She felt that something was wrong. Since when was there a new elder? 9th Elder Weiss was a green elf like her. He was a powerful dragon druid who could transform into a powerful wyvern. He had always been on good terms with Undine. Keith smiled and said proudly, "Because Elder Weiss broke the elven law, I have already locked him up. His duties and authority as an elder will be temporarily exercised by Waldron." Broke the law? Undine was shocked. What law did he break? Keith glanced at Undine. His mouth moved and two words came out. Corruption. Embezzlement. Undine was shocked. Elder Weiss actually embezzled? In Undine's impression, the chubby Wes had always been honest and easygoing. He was always smiling all day long. Undine refused to believe that he would be corrupt. "That's right. Elder Weiss has always been on good terms with me, but who would have thought that he would do such a thing?" Sigh. You may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. Keith sighed with a pained expression on his face. Great Elder Keith. That's enough. Second Elder Dobin couldn't take it anymore. He jumped out and retorted, "There's no conclusion on Elder Weiss's matter. We lack the most crucial evidence. Everything is just a suspicion. The big hat of corruption can't be pinned on him yet. Dobin and Weiss were old friends, so he had to speak up here. Looking at the red-faced Dobin, Keith didn't panic. He smiled and said, Elder Dobin, I know that. That's why I let Waldron take over temporarily. Once it's clear that Elder Weiss is innocent, he will naturally return to his position as an elder. Well, I'd be a fool to believe you. Looking at Keith's smiling face, Dobin thought. He gritted his teeth and wanted to punch him. This guy's words were fake. If you really believed him, he would sell you out. With Elder Weiss's temper, even if it wasn't clear in the end, he wouldn't have the face to continue being an elder. Great Elder Keith, Elder Weiss's matter must be investigated clearly. If there's no concrete evidence, I hope to clear his name. Ever since Undine left the KH-56 library, she didn't have any playmate. Today, she suddenly had so many friends. She was overjoyed. Go to Granary Web to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 409. Keith slowly said, "Those in favor of killing the Chimera, raise your hand." As soon as Keith finished speaking, the second Elder Dobin raised his hand high. The third Elder Lavina and the fifth Elder Rayson hesitated for a moment before raising their hands as well. In total, there were only 3 people in favor of killing the Chimera. Dobin furrowed his brows. He didn't think that the elders would still oppose the idea of killing the Chimera even though the situation was already so grim. The 7th Elder, 8th Elder, and 9th Elder were basically hopeless. They were all Keith's people and only followed Keith's lead. However, the 4th Elder Florinda and the 6th Elder Silver had already been elders for many years, and yet they still couldn't see the situation clearly. This made Dobin a little disappointed. Grand Elder Keith smiled. Now, those who oppose killing the Chimera and want to wait until the facts are clear before making a decision, raise your hand. After saying this, he raised his hand high. The 7th Elder Radcliffe, the 8th Elder Tompkin, and the 9th Elder Waldron all raised their hands at the same time. Keith smiled confidently and looked at the 4th Elder Florinda and the 6th Elder Silver. "What do the 2 elders think?" "I abstain." "I abstain." Florinda and Silver looked at each other and spoke in a low voice. Keith slowly sat down, looking like he was reading a pornographic novel. He smiled and said, "The life of the Chimera in the 456 book vault naturally has its own plans. A shocking conspiracy is slowly taking shape. For the first commercial-free article, please go to the website." Chapter 410. Keith returned to his home. It was different from the simple homes of the elves. His home was a magnificent 6-story, castle-like house. It was located at the best location of the World Tree. When he opened the window, he could overlook the entire continent from the World Tree. "Sir Great Elder!" Keith pushed open the door, and a tall and pretty blood elf maid walked up to him with a smile. She gently took off his coat and placed it neatly on the rack. There were 6 blood elf maids in Keith's home. Compared to the poor elves, there were 56 books in the library. "Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Keith, your main job in the Noah continent is to cooperate with us. Finding the great commander is just a matter of convenience. If there is any news, follow it up. However, you should focus on your current work." Saul paused for a moment before continuing. "By the way, Keith, let me tell you something. Our army may take action against the Noah continent in the near future. The powerhouses of the army are working hard to open a dimensional door. One day, our powerful army will come to this continent in an overwhelming manner. You have to be mentally prepared and understand the situation of the entire continent. At the same time, you have to control the elves and cooperate with them. We will take down the Noah continent in one go and kill all those who resist. Keith, your operation is the most crucial part." Keith immediately knelt down. His eyes were filled with determination as he loudly said, It is my duty to share your burdens and serve the army. Keith hopes that one day, I will be able to wear the army's armor and stand proudly on the land of the Noah continent. Chapter 4:11. It was late at night. The night breeze blew, rustling the leaves of the world tree. Bookbag web grain web. A simple treehouse stood quietly on a branch that was suspended in midair. This was the home of Elena, the elven empress. Although the elven race had an empress, there were no royal officials. Even so, as the place where the empress lived, it felt shabby no matter how one looked at it. It was even worse than an ordinary human family. Elves did not like luxury, from the empress to the commoners. Outside the elven empress house, Elder Dobin stood quietly, as if waiting for something. Dong dong dong. At this moment, a crisp sound came from the wooden stairs. Elder Dobin. Elena, the elven empress, was wearing thick cotton pajamas as she stood in front of Elder Dobin. She gently lifted her hair, revealing a cold and noble face. Your Majesty. Elder Dobin saw Elena and hurriedly knelt down to greet her. Although he was an elder, he could not ignore etiquette. Please rise, Elder. Elena smiled, with some surprise in her eyes. Elder, you came here in the middle of the night and purposely avoided my maid. I think there must be something important, right? Your Majesty is so smart. Dobin smiled. Today's Elder Council is all thanks to Your Majesty. If not for Your Majesty's most crucial words, I'm afraid the Elder Council's decision would have been passed. The situation on Lake Heart Island is serious. It's like a huge scythe hanging on my heart. Once it erupts, the elven race will be plunged into misery and suffering. This matter is so serious that I couldn't sleep for a few days. As he spoke, Dobin bowed deeply. I'm here to thank Your Majesty. For what? Elena smiled sweetly. I'm the Empress of the elven race. All the elves are my people. As an exotic beast from the divine realm, there are many benefits to keeping the chimera, but I'm more concerned about the safety of my people. The night breeze blew gently, brushing away the green hair in front of Elena's forehead and revealing a stunning face. Dobin, who happened to raise his head, was stunned for a moment. Dobin was a few years older than Elena, and the two of them had grown up together. One was the noble little princess of the elven race, while the other was a magic genius in everyone's eyes. At that time, many people saw them as a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, Dobin fell in love with Undine. At that time, she was the third elder of the elf clan. Unfortunately, Undine only had Corbett in her heart. Dobin's love was in vain. Princess Elena waited bitterly for a long time. Left with no choice, she could only marry her current husband and give birth to a pair of children. After that, she was crowned as the Empress. Dobin also got married and had children. The childhood sweetheart relationship came to an end. Looking at Elena's peerless beauty, Dobin sighed. Things were still the same, but people were different. Dobin vaguely remembered how Elena called him Big Brother Dobin, with snot running down her nose, when she was young. At this moment, his eyes were blank. Elena was embarrassed by Dobin's stare. She blushed and said softly, Elder Dobin, what are you looking at? Oh. At this moment, Dobin came back to his senses and immediately apologized. Sorry, Your Majesty. I was thinking about something just now and accidentally got distracted. It's nothing. Elena waved her hand magnanimously. At this moment, she remembered her identity. As the Empress, it was inappropriate for her to meet a man in the middle of the night. She immediately said, Elder Dobin, it's late. If there's nothing else, I'm going back to rest. Dobin then remembered his purpose for coming. He hurriedly said, Your Majesty, don't be in such a hurry. I have a request. Elena was about to leave when she heard this. She stopped in her tracks. Please speak, Elder Dobin. Dobin raised his head and stared at Elena. He said calmly, I wonder what Your Majesty thinks of Keith? Great Elder Keith? Elena was shocked. Why was he suddenly talking about this person? She pondered for a moment and said cautiously, "I'm sorry, Elder Dobin. With my identity, it seems that I shouldn't interfere too much with the matters of the Elder Council." Dobin took a step forward. "This is a serious matter. I hope to hear your Majesty's sincere words." Elena was silent. Dobin frowned. "Your Majesty, don't you feel that the Elder Council is completely different from before?" Elena hesitated for a moment as she looked at the serious Dobin. "If I were to comment, Great Elder Keith is young and vigorous. He does things swiftly and decisively. Ever since he became the Great Elder, he has indeed done a few major things for the elven race." Dobin sneered. "At the same time, he repels dissidents and places trusted aides. His methods are fun and he has a strong desire for power. Just look at how he got a few Blood Elf elders up here." Elena was silent for a moment. After a while, she nodded and said, "Indeed. Even I didn't realize that 4 Blood Elf elders had entered the Elder Council. It's as if they appeared overnight. This has already changed the balance of the 4 branches of the elven race." Dobin snorted coldly. "No one knows better than me how those fellows came in." After explaining everything, Elena opened her heart and let out a sigh. "Perhaps it's my natural perception. I always have a bad feeling about Great Elder Keith. I feel that there's an ulterior motive behind his dignified speech. I hope I'm just being paranoid." Elena sighed and said, "Great Elder Keith, I've always had a bad feeling about him. Take today's meeting as an example. I feel that there's an ulterior motive behind his pretentious speech." Dobin sighed. "Your Majesty, I won't hide it from you. I'm not in a good situation now. Although I'm the 2nd elder of the elven race, in reality, the Elder Council is basically his alone. The new Blood Elf elders are just there to make up the numbers. Everything is decided by Keith alone. During the voting, his side took up 4 votes. Such an Elder Council is no longer effective." Elena sighed as well. Yes. In the past, the Elder Council had different opinions. There were those who agreed and those who disagreed. But now the entire Elder Council has split into 2 factions. Great Elder Keith is even more so. In order to achieve his goals, he will do anything. Such an Elder Council is annoying. So, Dobin took a step forward and looked at Elena quietly. "Your Majesty, this is also the purpose of my visit tonight." "You mean?" Elena was shocked. She immediately reacted. "You intend to join forces with me?" "Yes," Dobin said firmly. "Now that Keith has 4 seats in the Elder Council, 1 more seat will change the balance of power. If this goes on, the Elder Council will no longer be the Elder Council. It will become a tool for Keith to achieve his political ambitions. Your Majesty, I hope to borrow your power." Elena smiled bitterly. "Elder Dobin, you think too highly of me. You know that although I'm the Queen, I have no influence over the Elder Council." "You do," Elder Dobin said firmly. "Perhaps you don't have the power to interfere with the Elder Council, but your status as the Queen is there. No one dares to challenge the Queen's will, and the Elders are no exception. Today's matter is the best proof." He was talking about Florinda and Silver, who changed their minds after the Elven Empress spoke. Outside the treehouse where the Elven Empress lived, Elder Dobin and Elena talked until late into the night. Little did they know that on a tree branch about 200 meters away from Elder Dobin, a figure stood quietly, a pair of blood-red eyes staring at them quietly. As the 2 left, the figure laughed maliciously and turned to leave. "Knock, knock, knock. Come in." Keith was sitting in his study, worrying about the Elder Council tomorrow. He stood up when he heard the knock on the door. The one who entered was his Blood Elf maid. The noble Blood Elf in maid uniform bowed slightly and said, "Great Elder Keith, the 9th Elder is looking for you." "Waldron?" Keith's eyes flashed with shock. "It's so late. Why is he looking for me?" "In reply to Great Elder, I don't know," the Blood Elf maid said. "Elder Waldron is unwilling to say, so he wants you." Let him in. Keith had a premonition that something big must have happened. Waldron would not come to his door so late at night. Waldron was invited in. He pushed the blood elf maid out, and after checking that no one was around, he carefully closed the door. Boss. Waldron walked up with a smile. Keith frowned and scolded, Waldron, are you crazy? Call me Great Elder. I've checked repeatedly. There's no one here. I still feel that calling you boss sounds better, Waldron said with a cheeky smile. Keith could not do anything about him. He put down the book in his hand and asked, What's the matter? Waldron's eyes lit up. Of course there's a matter. It's great news. With that, he leaned over to Keith's ear and whispered softly. Keith listened quietly at first. Then, his expression turned to one of shock. Is this true? Waldron nodded. Of course it's true. I saw it with my own eyes. I accidentally saw that old fellow Dobin walk out of the door, so I secretly followed him. I did not expect that he actually went to look for the elven queen Elena. They talked for a long time outside Her Majesty's treehouse. Keith asked, Did you hear what they were talking about? Waldron shook his head. No. That old fellow Dobin is very careful. I did not dare to get too close. I only saw a blurry figure. As for what they were talking about, I could not have heard it from so far away. Keith stood up and paced around the study, a sinister glint in his eyes. Waldron asked, Boss, is this information useful to you? Useful. It's very useful. Keith patted Waldron's shoulder heavily and laughed. Waldron, you've done a great job this time. Keith smiled. Don't worry. If I use this matter to achieve my goal, I'll definitely ask Lord Saul for a reward for you. Thank you for your compliment, boss. Waldron was so happy that his bones turned to jelly. He stood up straight with a bang. I'm willing to serve the army. Keith smiled and looked out of the window. The cold moonlight shone on his face, giving it a demonic snow-white color. He smiled sinisterly. Late night, treehouse, queen, nightgown. Elder Dobin, these few things are enough for you to drink a pot of water. Chapter 412. The next day, the 9 elders appeared at the meeting place on time. Elena sat in the middle, and the 9 elders sat in their respective seat. Grainweb, when they sat down, Dobin looked in Elena's direction and saw support in her eyes. Keith looked at the two of them and sneered. You'll know in a while. He stood up, cleared his throat, and said, The meeting is now called for. If anyone has anything to discuss, just say it. Dobin stood up. He decided to strike first. Now that there's nothing to do, I followed them from Library 56. I actually saw something that I usually don't see. Waldron said with a sinister smile. Elena's face had already turned pale. Tell me, what did you see? Keith interrupted with a smile. I saw. Waldron smiled and looked at Elena. I saw Elder Dobin and Her Majesty having a rendezvous. Nonsense. Shameless. As soon as Waldron finished speaking, Dobin and Elena both scolded him. Luvina frowned. Elder Waldron, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Even if you're a member of the Elder Council, you have to take responsibility for spreading rumors about Her Majesty. That's right, Elder Waldron. You can't say whatever you want. Be more specific. What else did you see? Keith said with a smile. His tone sounded as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Of course I'm not talking nonsense. I saw it with my own eyes. Waldron smiled proudly. I also saw that not long after Elder Dobin arrived, Her Majesty came out. She was wearing a white silk nightgown, and she threw herself into Elder Dobin's arms as soon as she saw him. Elder Dobin was also naughty. He kissed, touched, and nibbled on our beloved Her Majesty, and he almost took off her clothes. Waldron described vividly, and his peach-blossom eyes were filled with lust. You bastard! Elena was so angry that she couldn't even speak properly. Her lips trembled, and her body trembled involuntarily. Elder Dobin's face alternated between green and white. At this moment, he finally understood that he had stepped into a meticulously set trap. His mind went blank. Dobin understood that he had lost. He had lost at the hands of Keith. A small incident had been used by Keith. Dobin stood there blankly, unable to speak for a long time. Luvina frowned. I don't believe that Elder Dobin would do such a thing. This is blatant slander. Elder Dobin, don't you agree? Dobin was silent. He couldn't answer Luvina's question. He had indeed gone to see the Elven Empress, but it was only an ordinary meeting. He definitely didn't do anything lewd like Waldron said. However, how could he explain this? If he said that he didn't do such a thing, how could he explain his appearance outside the Elven Empress's treehouse? The Elven Empress was of noble status. Even the elders couldn't invite her to see him late at night. Generally speaking, Her Majesty wouldn't see him either. Luvina and the fifth Elder Rayson looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry. Waldron smiled. Elder Dobin, it's easy for you to prove that I'm slandering you. You just have to tell me where you went last night. I believe that my eyes aren't that old yet. Keith also said, That's right. Elder Dobin, why don't you explain where you went last night? Dobin was silent. He now understood how vicious Keith's scheme was. Even if he told the whole story now, not many people would believe him. Keith smiled and raised his head. What do you think? Your Majesty the Elven Empress. Elena's face was pale. She gripped the armrest of the chair tightly, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her long hair hung down and covered her face. Everyone was silent. They hadn't expected this scene. Only a few Blood Elf elders had smug smiles on their faces. Ha ha! Keith laughed. Legend has it that Elder Dobin and Her Majesty grew up together. They were childhood sweethearts and had long since developed feelings for each other. Later on, due to a strange combination of circumstances, they each established their own family. Now, their old feelings have been rekindled. It seems that the power of love is indeed great, Keith said mockingly. Dobin clenched his fists in anger and looked straight at Keith's pornographic novel. His eyes were about to spit fire. Keith didn't mind. He smiled faintly and said, Elder Dobin, did I say anything wrong? Stop talking. At this moment, a sharp voice rang out. It came from the Elven Empress, who was sitting in the middle of the main seat. Keith smiled coldly. It wasn't easy for him to seize this opportunity. How could he let them go so easily? The most important thing in a political battle was to beat the dog while it was down. At this moment, Elena, the Elven Empress, made a move that shocked everyone. Elena slowly reached out to remove the elven crown on her head and gently placed it on the table beside her. She raised her head and smiled sadly. Elders, due to my unwell body, I am no longer qualified for the position of Empress. I now announce that I am abdicating. After saying that, she covered her face and rushed out of the room. Empress abdicating? Everyone looked at each other. They didn't expect such a turn of events. When they came back to their senses, Elena was already far away. The entire Elder Council dispersed unhappily. Keith also understood that this matter could only come to an end now that the Empress had abdicated. There was no point in continuing to harp on it. It might even cause the opposite effect. Damn it, I let you get away with it. Looking at Dobin's dispirited back, Keith was also angry. Things had started off well, but things didn't go according to his plan. He originally wanted to get rid of Dobin. That way there would be an empty elder position. He had even prepared a candidate. The Empress's abdication wasn't his original intention. The Empress didn't have any actual power. There was no point in getting rid of her. Thinking of this, Keith couldn't help but be shocked. Could it be that Elena has seen through my plan and sacrificed herself? But these elves are really honest. They admitted to something without concrete evidence. Keith thought. If it were him, he would definitely deny it to the end. Even if there was evidence, in the face of politics, what was evidence? Don't cry, don't cry. In Elena's room, the Elven Empress was lying on the bed after her abdication. Beside her, the third elder, Luvina, was comforting her gently. Luvina had always been good friends with Elena. Seeing this, she sighed softly. Your Majesty, could it be that you and Elder Dobin? Elena looked up with teary eyes. Luvina, you are my best sister. Do you believe me? I don't believe it. But... Luvina hesitated. But why did you abdicate? Do you know that your actions have a great impact on the entire elven race? Elena smiled bitterly. I did see him last night. What? You saw him? You? Luvina was shocked. Then she finally reacted and slapped her thigh. Keith, you bastard, you're really insidious. How could you do such a thing? It was originally a small matter, but Keith magnified it. Elena couldn't defend herself. He was indeed sinister. Waldron! This guy is just spreading rumors. Luvina was enraged when she heard this. She stood up abruptly. No, I have to find him. Sister Luvina, don't. Elena pulled her back. He won't admit it. Besides, I did see Elder Dobin. As she spoke, Elder Dobin walked in. Luvina glared at him. Dobin, you hurt my sister and you still have the face to come. Dobin lowered his head. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. Although Elena had abdicated, Dobin still called her Your Majesty. Elena was very magnanimous in front of Dobin. She wiped away her tears and smiled. Elder Dobin, don't worry. I'm doing this for the elven race. For the elven race. Luvina frowned. Why? Elena smiled. I just figured it out. Keith's goal is to get rid of Elder Dobin. Get rid of Elder Dobin? Why would he want to get rid of Elder Dobin? Luvina still didn't quite understand. Dobin said, Elder Luvina, have you forgotten about Weiss? Keith's method is the same as getting rid of Weiss. Elder Weiss? Only then did Luvina remember that Weiss was locked up in prison. If Elder Dobin was removed, there would be another empty seat in the Elder Council. If Keith took 5 seats in the Elder Council. Luvina almost didn't dare to think about it anymore. She was secretly wary of Keith. Go to Granary Web to see the first commercial-free episode. Chapter 4:14. Slya rode on Aurora's hippogriff, while Edge transformed into his flying form and rushed towards the Elven Queen's house at the fastest speed. When the 3 of them arrived at the Elven Queen's house, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Remember, Jean gone in 1 second and provide you with an exciting novel to read. Grainweb, the Elven Queen's house, was surrounded by 3 layers of guards. Teams of blood elves were patrolling and guarding the surroundings. Aurora frowned. Slya, this doesn't seem right. Who is it? Who is up there? Come down. At this moment, the blood elves noticed the hippogriff in the sky. A person who looked like a captain shouted coldly. Aurora was a little hesitant. Everything in front of her was too strange. When did the Elven Queen's house get surrounded? But the blood elf captain on the ground did not give Aurora a chance to think. He shouted, If you don't come down, we will attack. There were powerful magicians among them. The word attack was not empty words. Aurora was helpless. She exchanged glances with Slya and could only lower their altitude. At this moment, the blood elf captain led a large group of blood elves to surround them. Move aside, I am Princess Slya of the Elven Empire. I want to see my mother. Princess Slya shouted coldly as soon as she got off the hippogriff. Princess Slya? The blood elves looked at each other. Many of them recognized this little princess, and many of them quietly opened up a path. At this moment the blood elf captain said coldly, I'm sorry, Princess Slya. Great Elder Keith has ordered that no one is allowed to see Her Majesty the Queen. What did you say? Slia, Edge, and Aurora could not believe their ears. Great Elder Keith had actually imprisoned Her Majesty the Queen. Edge's face turned red. He said angrily, "Say it again." "Say it again?" "Sure." The Blood Elf captain was expressionless. "We are under Great Elder Keith's order to guard this place. No one is allowed to see Her Majesty, not even Princess Slia." When the group of Blood Elves heard this, they immediately surrounded them again, not allowing Slia and the others to go over. You! Cilia was almost mad with anger. Her waist flashed, and a dark green magic staff appeared in her hand. She exasperatedly said, "Get out of the way or I'll kill you." In the face of Cilia's threat, the Blood Elf captain's expression remained unchanged as he said indifferently, "If Princess Cilia wants to kill me, then naturally you can." He paused and raised his voice. "Where's the vice-captain?" "Here." Another Blood Elf stepped forward. He was a Blood Elf knight in heavy armor. The moment he stepped out, he stood in front of the Blood Elf captain. The Blood Elf captain silently removed the space bag from his waist and handed it to the Blood Elf beside him. He calmly said, "Your Highness, I'm very sorry. I'm a soldier and will only listen to orders from above. Due to my duty, I can't let you in." He glanced at the vice-captain beside him. "You're the first vice-captain. After I die, you'll take over as the captain. As for whether you let them in or not, that's not up to me." The vice-captain smiled proudly. "Don't worry, Captain. After I die, there'll be a second vice-captain and a third vice-captain to take over. Otherwise, there are still soldiers below. No matter what, we won't let them in. We're soldiers, and it's our duty to obey orders." The Blood Elf captain nodded, turned his head, and smiled calmly. "Princess Cilia, you can do it now." After saying that, he closed his eyes. You! Slia's face was full of anger, and the hand that was holding the magic staff was trembling. However, the urge to see her mother still prevailed. She gritted her teeth, and wisps of green nature energy quickly condensed. The atmosphere suddenly froze, and a faint murderous intent pervaded the surroundings. Seeing that their beloved captain had died an unnatural death, the Blood Elf warriors suppressed their anger. Their hands pressed on the hilt of their swords, and even their breathing became hurried. No. At the last moment, Aurora yanked Slia aside. Slia magic pornographic novel. The natural energy in the magic staff immediately disappeared. Phew, the crisis was resolved, and the Blood Elf warriors heaved a sigh of relief. They cast grateful gazes at Aurora. "Aurora, why did you stop me?" Slia's eyes were red, and she stared fiercely at Aurora. "Doing this won't solve anything. Slia, don't do anything stupid." Aurora sighed and said. Aurora stopped Slia's impulsive actions. She turned to look at the Blood Elf captain, bit her lip and said, "You really can't let us in?" The Blood Elf captain opened his eyes and bowed to Aurora solemnly. "I'm sorry, I can't let you in. As a soldier, this is my duty. I hope you can understand." "I hope your Highness can understand," Aurora sighed. "Is there no other way?" The Blood Elf captain hesitated for a moment before reminding her. "There is. If you can get Great Elder Keith's warrant, I can let you in." Aurora nodded. "Thank you. You're welcome. Let's go." Aurora tugged at Slia. "Aurora, why did you pull me just now?" After being pulled away by Aurora, Slia's anger had not subsided. She angrily raised her small fist. "This fellow is too arrogant. I must teach him a lesson." Aurora sighed. "Slia, do you still not understand? These people are just following orders. There's no point in you being angry with them." "Then what should we do?" Edge asked. Slia also calmed down. In fact, Aurora was also burning with anxiety. Ron and Sister Shea had been arrested and imprisoned. She desperately wanted to rescue them. Aurora muttered to herself for a moment. "Let's go. We'll look for Great Elder Keith." A bad premonition grew in Aurora's heart. She faintly felt that everything in front of her was like the omen of an impending storm. Clang! The wooden gate was closed. Ron, Shea, Basara, and Rainey were locked in a cage. Caw, caw, caw. A series of mechanical sounds could be heard, and the cage was lifted into the air. The cage in the air creaked and swayed as soon as he moved. Let us out quickly. Shea, Basara, and Rainey leaned against the side of the cage and shouted. The Blood Elf soldiers ignored them and walked straight out. Then, they slammed the door shut, and the surroundings became pitch black. Yesterday they were distinguished guests. Today they had become prisoners. They could not wrap their minds around it. Humph, these elves! Shea scolded harshly. She roughly touched the side of the cage and made a soft "eh." This is made of wood? A wooden cage? Shea was overjoyed when she heard that. She thought that if it was made of wood, she could just use her sword to cut it open. At this time, she reached for her waist but felt nothing. Then, she remembered that everyone's space bags had been taken away by the Blood Elf. Sister Shea, can you break it open? Rainey's voice came from the darkness. Shea sighed. I want to, but my sword has been taken away by the elves. Sigh. Basara and Rainey's tone was full of pity. At this time, Shea suddenly had an idea and said with a mischievous smile, How can a wooden cage trap this young lady? This young lady is born with divine strength. Watch me break this wooden cage open. Shea was a warrior and had a strong body. She was different from Ron and the other magic-type jobs. It was not difficult for her to break a small piece of wood. Basara's eyes lit up. That's right. Sister Shea, quickly break it open and save us. Rainey also said, Yes, yes, yes. Sister Shea, you are the strongest. Quickly, break the cage open. Very good. Watch me. Shea smiled confidently. She spat twice into her palm and grabbed the 2 pieces of wood at the side of the cage under Basara and Rainey's admiring gaze. The pieces of wood were not big and could be held tightly with one hand. Shea took a deep breath and pushed outwards. It did not move. Shea was in a daze. Normally, with her strength, she would be able to break a small piece of wood. However, these thin pieces of wood seemed to have taken root and didn't move an inch. Shea did not believe it. She gritted her teeth and increased her strength. Go for it. Sister Shea, go for it. Basara and Rainey tried their best to cheer Shea on. Shea used all her strength, but these seemingly weak pieces of wood were as strong as iron. Not to mention breaking, they did not even bend. Shea shouted loudly. She fiercely clenched her teeth, and the flames on her body ignited with a bang, illuminating the surrounding area. At this moment, she actually used her do-chi. Grain. Table of Contents. Chapter 4:15. The flaming combat energy lit up Basara and Rainey's excited faces. However, even though Shea pushed her combat energy to its peak, the wooden stick still did not budge. Shea, don't waste your energy. At this time, Ron's voice came from not far away. Shea looked over and saw Ron holding something in his hand and sawing at the wooden stick with a serious expression. Ron, what's wrong? Shea heard him and stopped. Ron waved the sharp bone in his hand and said to Shea, This is definitely not ordinary wood. Phew! Shea was still very obedient to Ron. She removed the combat energy on her body and calmed herself down. She asked, Ron, what do we do now? Ron did not answer. He quickly thought for a while and waved his hand. A wisp of black energy circled around his fingers. Not long after, a large group of skeleton warriors rushed out from the ground. They were holding giant swords, and under Ron's command, they swung their weapons at the tall frame imprisoning Ron. Zing, zing. It was as if something had hit the hardwood, making an unpleasant sound. In this quiet prison, it was especially ear-piercing. However, no matter how hard the skeleton warriors tried, the wooden frame still did not budge. There was not even a mark on it, let alone a cut. To Ron's surprise, the wood was much harder than he expected. Not to mention the skeleton warriors, Ron even summoned the strongest Terror Knight. Still, they could not move the wooden frame at all. Shea, Basara, and Rainey's eyes gradually became disappointed. Try using magic. Ron had no other choice. He could only summon the skeleton sorcerer and hope that the strange wood did not have strong anti-magic abilities. Ron, be careful. Shea was a little worried. She knew that the magic was all aimed at Ron. Ron nodded and smiled at her, thanking her for her concern. Shea's heart warmed. "Pa." Ron snapped his fingers. As if they had received an order, the skeleton sorcerer's eyes suddenly lit up. The magic in their hands quickly gathered. Not long after, dozens of magic bullets rose from the ground. Boom, 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 countless magic spells exploded on the cage that Ron was standing on, causing the cage to shake continuously. Ron hid in a corner of the cage and used the skeleton shield to protect his body. The magical bombardment finally stopped, and when the smoke and dust dispersed, the cage was charred black, but the cage was still intact. "It's useless." Ron sighed, defeated. He spread out his hands. "I have no other choice." Sigh. The three of them sighed in unison. Shea pinched the wood and could not help but ask, "What kind of wood is this? How can it be so hard?" No one answered Shea because everyone's heart was filled with the same question. Just then, a voice suddenly sounded. "This is a tree that grows in the fairy forest. Its name is Elinos." The sudden voice gave Ron and the others a shock. In this dark space, it was especially creepy. "Oh my God!" Rainey heard and hid in the corner of the cage, her body trembling uncontrollably. Who are you? Who's there?" Xiaolai was also shocked. Her voice was trembling. "Someone's there." Ron was startled. He looked over and saw a short and fat middle-aged man sitting cross-legged in a cage not far behind him. From his appearance, he looked like a green elf. Perhaps because he had been lying down and the lighting was dim, Ron and the others did not notice that someone was hiding here. The middle-aged green elf smiled at Ron in a friendly manner and continued, "This tree called Elinos has branches that are as soft as silk. However, after being soaked in the magic potion, it becomes a monster. Elder Wes, as an elder of the fairy race, how did they catch you?" Wes smiled. "A human being caught here actually has the heart to ask about the fairy race. Should I say that you guys have too much time on your hands?" Weiss paused for a moment, smiled and said, "Actually, there's no harm in telling you. I was arrested for corruption. I don't know who reported that I had received a few black crystal coins from someone and hid them under my bed. In fact, I had never received such things. So, I was at ease and allowed them to search for them. In the end, they really did find them. I don't know what's going on, but I was arrested and put in here." Ron could not help but be speechless. "Isn't it obvious that they are framing you? Elder Wes, how can you believe such a thing?" "Of course I don't believe it, but I don't have any evidence to prove my innocence." Wes smiled. "However, I believe that the elders will find out the truth and clear my name, because I didn't do such a thing." Even when he was caught and imprisoned, Elder Wes still believed that the elders would help him clear his name. In fact, the elders had already been controlled by Keith and the others. His position had already been taken over. Ron shrugged. These elves were so naive that they were adorable. He actually believed that someone would help him clear his name even after such an obvious framing. At this moment, Shea rolled her eyes and smiled. "Elder Wes, from your tone, it seems that you have a way to open these cages?" "Of course," Wes answered honestly. "What is it?" The eyes of the four lit up as they asked in unison. Elder Wes smiled. "Actually, there's no harm in telling you guys. You can't do it anyway." He paused for a moment. "It's very simple to open these cages. You must have the power of the sacred domain. In front of the power of the sacred domain, these cages are like paper. They are not worth mentioning. Sigh. Ron, Shea, and the others all sighed. Wasn't this nonsense? It was as if he didn't say anything. If they had the power of the sacred domain, they wouldn't have stayed here. Ron had a sacred domain puppet, spirit zombie Phalon. However, it was hidden in his space bag, and the space bag had been taken away by the elf. He couldn't summon it even if he wanted to. Ahem, Elder Wes. Shea smiled, cleared his throat and said, I think, as a member of the Elf Race's Elder Council, I think your strength has already reached the sacred domain, right? Wes smiled. What are you trying to say? I want to. Can you help us open these cages and let us out? Shea begged softly. She put her hands together. Please. Sorry, I can't. Although I can open these cages, I can't help you. Wes smiled. You were captured and must have broken the laws of the elven race. If I help you, wouldn't I be releasing prisoners? Besides, if I let you go, I would have to break the cages myself. Wouldn't I become a fugitive then? Elder Wes. Shea was about to say something when Wes interrupted her. Although I don't feel like you are bad people, doing this would violate the laws of the elven race. Don't ever mention letting you go again. After saying that, Elder Wes closed his eyes and ignored Shea's request. Forget it, Shea, stop shouting. Ron stopped Shea, who was constantly banging on the cage. This cage can't hold Elder Wes at all. He stayed here willingly. If he could help us, he would have left long ago, smart. At this moment, Weiss opened his eyes and praised. Humph! Shea snorted angrily. She rolled her eyes at Wes and didn't say anything else. After saying that, Wes closed his eyes again. The dungeon became quiet again. It was so quiet that it was a little scary. Ron smiled bitterly. There was nothing he could do. Please go to www.grain.com to see the first commercial-free episode. Chapter 4:17. Waldron narcissistically looked at his reflection in the mirror. Ever since he came to the elven race, his only hobby was to close the door and look at himself in the mirror. Even his blood elf maid found it strange. Bookbag Grainweb. Waldron smiled faintly and looked at himself for a long time. After a while, he turned back into a blood elf. Dobin looked at the scene in front of him with his mouth agape. If he had not seen it for himself, he would not have believed that the blood elf elder of the elven race was actually another race. When he looked at the mirror again, Waldron's eyes showed a trace of disdain. I'm not used to looking like this. It's so ugly. He smiled. But I'll be able to return to my original appearance soon. According to Sir Keith, it won't be long before we completely control the elven race and lay a solid foundation for the arrival of the army. What? Dobin was shocked. From Waldron's words, he could finally confirm that Keith was also involved. Moreover, it seemed like he was the one who arranged and commanded the whole thing. Thinking of all the things that Keith did when he came to power, Dobin could not help but suspect that in a short period of time, he was promoted from the last elder to the chief elder. Then, he used various methods to exclude dissidents and made someone like Waldron an elder. From the looks of it, Dobin guessed that 7th Elder Radcliffe and 8th Elder Dopkin were also on their side. If his assumption was true, then this unknown race had already taken up 4 seats in the Elven Elder Council, and the Elven Elder Council was the highest authority in the entire Elven race. If they were to squeeze out one more elder. At the thought of this, Dobin's hands and feet turned cold, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. At this time, he realized that this was a conspiracy, a huge conspiracy against the elven race. Who are they? What is their purpose in coming to the elven race? Dobin's hands and feet couldn't help but tremble. His heart was filled with fear. It was a fear of the unknown. Waldron smiled and put on his clothes. When he buttoned the last button, suddenly, a strange movement on the mirror attracted his attention. Waldron was shocked. He rushed to the window and lifted the curtains, only to see a white owl standing outside the window, looking into the room. "Oh no, we've been discovered." Dobin was also shocked. He controlled the owl to fly up, looking as if it was frightened. "Luckily, it's just a bird." Seeing that the owl had left, Waldron heaved a sigh of relief. Then, his expression suddenly became tense. "That's not right. It's daytime now, where did the owl come from?" At this moment, he saw a figure leaving in a hurry. "Someone is spying on me." Waldron's face flashed with murderous intent. He opened the window and rushed out. After leaving, Dobin's heart was in a mess. He had not recovered from the huge shock. Now, a huge conspiracy was placed in front of him, making him helpless. The elven race had been peaceful for too long. In the face of such a troublesome matter, as the second elder, he was helpless. Suddenly, there was a sound of wind behind Elder Dobin's head. A red shadow suddenly appeared. It was the ninth elder, Waldron, who stood in front of him and blocked his way. Waldron said with a smile that was not a smile. "Hee, I was wondering who it was. So it's Elder Dobin. Elder Dobin, what are you doing in such a hurry?" In the face of Waldron's conspiracy, Dobin did not have a way to deal with it. He could only not act rashly and alert the enemy, and calm them down first. Dobin's expression was originally a little flustered, but he immediately calmed down. He expected that Waldron did not have any concrete evidence to prove that he was the one who had been spying on them. He smiled and said, "It's nothing, I was just passing by." "Elder Waldron, why did you stop me?" Waldron looked at Dobin. He was not sure if that owl had anything to do with him. He could only ask tentatively, "This is the Blood Elven settlement. Elder Dobin, what are you, a white elf, doing here?" I'm just here to look for someone," Dobin replied with a smile. His mind was turning into a pornographic novel. It was very fast. "Who are you looking for?" Waldron could not help but feel suspicious. He did not know if he had seen the scene just now. "I'm looking for—" Dobin was about to answer, but he immediately stopped. He thought to himself, "I'm the second elder. What right do you, the last elder, have to question me?" Dobin straightened his back and said righteously, "Elder Waldron, I don't think there's a need to report to you who I'm here to look for, right?" Dobin refused to admit it, and Waldron could do nothing about it. However, the suspicion in his heart grew. He faintly felt that Dobin's appearance here was not a coincidence. Thinking of this, Waldron's eyes widened in anger. He suddenly raised his voice. "Elder Dobin, what did you see?" "I didn't see anything." At this moment, Dobin was frightened by Waldron, and a trace of panic appeared on his face. This trace of panic was sensitively captured by Waldron. "Have I been discovered?" Waldron secretly shouted in his heart. At the same time, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. "Go to hell." The long sword in his hand turned into a flying rainbow and slashed fiercely at Dobin. The matter had been exposed. Waldron could only silence him by killing him. After all, Dobin's concealment skills were not good enough, and he was easily seen through. If it were Keith, his psychological quality would be much more stable, and it would not be obvious on the surface at all. "Why, Waldron, do you want to silence me by killing me?" Dobin laughed loudly. He also knew that he had been seen through by Waldron. At this time, he also let go of his worries. A magic staff appeared in his hand at some point, and he fought with Waldron. In the sky above Nordrassel, a battle between a sword saint and a warlock saint began. In order to kill each other, both sides used their strongest strength. Boom! 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 The fire sword Saint Waldron, who was holding a long sword, had a murderous look on his face. Flames surrounded his body, and the blazing flames burned half the sky. Dobin, who was a dual fire and water warlock saint, was not to be outdone. He protected his body with water elemental energy and restrained his opponent. At the same time, he used fire magic to attack. Both sides fought to their heart's content. In terms of overall strength, Dobin was stronger than Waldron. However, the battle between the Sacred Domain and the Sacred Domain was not so easy to determine the winner. Waldron, who are you? What is your purpose in coming to the elf tribe? What is your army? Dobin used his powerful strength to firmly suppress Waldron while asking at the same time. I'll tell you when you're dead. Waldron grinned. Even though he was at a disadvantage in the battle with Dobin, he became crazier and crazier. He ignored his own defense and attacked Dobin again and again. The battle between the two powerhouses of the Sacred Domain caused a huge commotion. For a time, half of the Blood Elves in the Elven settlement were alarmed. They walked out of their stone houses and looked at the sky in shock. Oh my God, two powerhouses of the Sacred Domain are actually fighting. What's going on? It seems to be the Second Elder and the Ninth Elder. Why are they fighting? I don't know, the Blood Elves discussed and pointed at the sky. However, in the face of a battle between two elders, none of them were willing to intervene. Firstly, the two elders were powerhouses of the Sacred Domain, and the Blood Elves present did not have the strength of the Sacred Domain. Secondly, they were afraid of the authority of the two elders. It was unwise to rashly intervene without knowing the situation. Dobin, I'll show you my true strength. Waldron, who was in a predicament, laughed wildly. He stretched out the sword in his left hand, and an extremely terrifying aura was released from his body. It was like a ferocious beast from hell. Powerful flames burst out from his body. Then, the originally bright red flames turned black. The black flames burned fiercely. At this time, Waldron had finished accumulating power and released his strongest domain. Purgatory of Destruction. What kind of power is this? Dobin was shocked. Waldron's aura suddenly changed, becoming extremely ferocious and overbearing. The black flames that were constantly pulsing were crazily rolling towards him. Dobin used his water shield to defend himself. At this time, he suddenly realized that Waldron's power was much stronger than the fire element. No, this is definitely not the fire element. Dobin gritted his teeth. At this time, he thought of Waldron's mysterious race in the mirror. Could it be the power of that mysterious race? What's going on over there? It seems like someone is fighting, and it's a powerhouse from the Sacred Domain. The fierce battle also alarmed Great Elder Keith, who was staying in another place. He frowned. Suddenly, his face became extremely shocked. No, this is the power of destruction. Damn it, which bastard is using the power of destruction? Didn't I tell them to be careful? Is it Radcliffe? Tompkin or Waldron? Keith's eyes widened. Then, his face was filled with anger. He cursed fiercely. Damn it, what is this guy doing? Great Elder Keith. At this time, a blood elf maid pushed the door open. She was about to report to Great Elder Keith about the Second Elder and the Ninth Elder's fight. Keith couldn't be bothered with her. He dashed out of the door in a flash. Damn it, this guy is really King difficult to deal with. Dobin noticed that ever since Waldron used the black flames, his strength had been increasing. Even though Dobin's fire magic was powerful, he could not deal with him in a short time. Someone's coming. At this time, Dobin's expression changed. He felt an extremely powerful force rapidly approaching. It's Keith. Dobin sensed Keith's aura. Other than that, there were several other powerful forces that were about the same level as Keith. They were also rapidly approaching. Could it be their accomplices? Dobin's heart skipped a beat. Then, his face darkened. It should be. No, I have to leave quickly. Otherwise, I won't be able to leave if I'm surrounded later. Dobin's mind was still very clear. In a situation where everything was still unclear, staying here was not a very wise choice. Dobin's expression was grave. He had already sensed that a conspiracy against the elves was unknowingly unfolding. If he had not accidentally seen all of this today, perhaps all of the elves would still be in the dark. At this thought, Dobin smiled. Elder Waldron's strength is indeed powerful. Today's competition ends here. Let's fight again another day. After saying that, he laughed and tapped his long magic staff downward. With a teleportation, he disappeared on the spot. Waldron's strength was inferior to Dobin's, so it would not be easy for Dobin to kill him. However, if Dobin insisted on leaving, he knew that he did not have the ability to stop him. At this time, Keith had already arrived. At the same time, Radcliffe and Tompkin arrived as well. They looked at Waldron with confusion. Looking at the messy scene, Keith's face darkened. He glared at Waldron and asked coldly, "Waldron, what the F***ck is going on with you?" Chapter 4:18. This. Waldron wanted to say something but stopped. After all, he was the one who started the whole thing. Everyone's eyes were firmly fixed on him. Bookbag Grainet. Keith's face was gloomy. Speak. Waldron had no choice but to tell him the whole story. He didn't even dare to hide any details from him. After hearing this, Keith became silent and didn't say a word. Boss, Waldron's heart was uneasy. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a loud slap. He was firmly slapped in the face by Keith. At this time, Keith finally exploded. He pointed at Waldron and scolded, "You bastard, I already warned you to be very, very careful in the elven race. Don't transform into your original form if you don't have to. You ruined my plan the moment you transformed into your original form. You F***king messed up all my plans." Waldron covered his face in grievance. "Boss, it's not my fault. I'm usually very careful. It's all that bastard Dobin's fault. He transformed into a bird to spy on me." Keith glared at him. "You deserve it. Why did you transform into your original form for no reason? Just to see what your original form looks like? Dobin suffered because of me. Doesn't he want revenge? Doesn't he want to catch us where it hurts? You, on the other hand, exposed your biggest secret directly. Not only that, you also poured out everything. What's with that army?" Waldron lowered his head and didn't say anything. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little stiff, Radcliffe coughed and interrupted. "Boss, things have already come to this. It's useless to blame Waldron. It's more important to think about how to deal with the aftermath." "Yes, boss. You always have a lot of ideas. What should we do now?" Tompkins said in agreement. "There's no other way," Keith said expressionlessly. "Now that we've been exposed, Dobin won't let us go. How about we get out of here? If we fail the mission, you'll have to answer to Lord Saul yourself. Or we can launch our plan in advance. If we succeed, we'll die trying." It was no wonder that Keith was so angry. Originally, he could have done it step by step, but now Waldron had messed things up. Now, he could only resort to extreme measures. "Boss, what do you plan to do?" Waldron's interest was piqued. Keith pondered for a moment and said, "It seems that it's time to use the most advanced political method, to tear apart the clan." "Tear apart the clan?" Everyone looked at each other and didn't understand what Keith meant. A sinister smile appeared on Keith's face. "That's right, it's time for the Blood Elves to do something." Although the short battle had ended, the battle took place in the village where the Blood Elves lived. All the Blood Elves were talking about it. Until now, they still did not know what had happened. Not long after the 4 elders of the Blood Elves returned, rumors started spreading in the Blood Elves village. In a small stone house, dozens of Blood Elves were gathered and discussing something. "I received news that Elder Dobin came today. He wanted to kill our Elder Waldron, and the two of them started fighting in the sky." A Blood Elf warrior whispered to everyone. "Why did he want to kill our Elder Waldron? I think he's a good person. Another blood elf mage asked. It's simple. Because they look down on us. That blood elf warrior said mysteriously. Those noble white elves, green elves, and dark elves said that we live in stone houses and are different from them. They said that we blood elves are not elves at all. What, they actually dared to say that? A blood elf knight jumped up in anger. Who said that? I'm going to settle the score with him. I've heard of such a saying too. I've heard of it too. The blood elves said angrily. Those fellows are just looking down on us. The four branches of the elven race seemed to be harmonious on the surface, but in reality, there was constant friction. It was just that the elves did not like to be calculative, so they could usually resolve it easily. However, in reality, the contradictions still existed. Once someone instigated them, they would all explode. Just as they were discussing in full swing, a blood elf pushed open the door and entered. Everyone, the great elder has summoned us to the village square. Everyone was stunned. Great elder? Which great elder? Is it the great elder of the village? No, it's the chief great elder of the elven race, Lord Keith. The blood elf who had sent the message replied. The blood elves came to the village square in twos and threes. When the rumors were spreading, everyone was on tenterhooks, and the entire village was filled with an unusual atmosphere. Not long after, the village square was packed with blood elves. They were all tall, golden-haired, red-eyed, and fair-skinned. They all gathered in the square and waited quietly. Just then, a figure that was not very tall walked out slowly. In an instant, the blood elves were excited. That's Great Elder Keith. The Great Elder has come out. Keith was rather famous among the blood elves. Once he appeared, countless blood elves cheered, especially some female blood elves. They went crazy, and many fainted from excessive excitement. Quiet, everyone, quiet down. Keith, who was standing on the podium in the middle of the square, was expressionless. He waved his hand and everyone quieted down. Like an army, Keith pointed his finger, and all the blood elves quieted down, showing good organizational discipline. In fact, many blood elves held important positions in the elven army. Keith nodded, cleared his throat, and said, "Today, I've gathered everyone here for a short meeting. This is also the first time I've held a meeting in the village since I became the great elder of the elven race." Keith paused. Just now, when I came here, a blood elf warrior asked me, "Great Elder, you're always smiling when I see you. Why do you have such a cold expression today?" I told him, "It's because I really can't smile today. Today, everyone saw the battle between the powerhouses of the sacred domain that took place in the sky above the village. There were two people involved in the battle. One was the second elder of the Elven Elder Council, Dobin, and the other was the ninth elder of our blood elf race, Waldron." Keith deliberately emphasized the word us. "I think many of you are very curious as to why Elder Dobin and our Elder Waldron would fight." Keith's tone was steady, and it had the power to inspire people. Everyone listened quietly. In the large hall, apart from Keith's words, it was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. It's very simple. They look down on us. For a long time, we blood elves have been a very friendly race. We never had many demands for power or benefit. Because of this, we've always been looked down on and oppressed. The power that belongs to us has been invaded bit by bit. It wasn't easy for us to obtain enough power to speak in the Elven Council of Elders and occupy 4 seats in the Council of Elders. But don't forget that for a long time, we blood elves have only had 1 elder in the Council of Elders. According to the principle of balance of power, the blood elves should have at least 2 seats. However, the seat that belonged to them was occupied by another race. Keith fully displayed his eloquence and stirred up the emotions of everyone present. Those noble white elves, the green elves who are known as the children of the forest, the dark elves who are known as the assassins of the night, they are jealous of the power that we blood elves have obtained. However, don't forget that their butts aren't clean either. Elder Weiss was stripped of his position as an elder due to corruption, and Elder Dobin was in trouble because of his tryst with the Elven Queen. However, what about us? What did the elders of our blood elves do wrong? Why are they doubting us? Keith raised his voice and waved his fists in agitation. It was said that a politician's talent for acting was innate. This was best applied to Keith. Hearing this, all the blood elves' breathing became hurried. Their faces were filled with anger. Keith's tone became agitated. We blood elves have been bullied for a long time, and we've endured it. We've been violated for a long time, and we've endured it. However, when our lives are threatened, we can no longer endure it. As he spoke, Keith looked around at the enraged people below, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. We just received news that the other 3 branches have reached an agreement. They believe that we blood elves don't belong to the elven branch, so they have decided to expel us. Keith took a deep breath and calmed down. This is also the reason why Elder Waldron and Elder Dobin are arguing. The moment Keith finished speaking, the entire plaza was in an uproar. Keith's words had pushed the atmosphere to an even higher level. How can this be? How can they do this? Great Elder Keith, is what you said true? It's absolutely true. Keith nodded calmly and shouted loudly, Our rights have been violated. Our interests have been violated. When we blood elves decided to give up these, we could not gain the elven race's respect. Let's not forget that freedom and dignity are much more important than interests. Finally, under Keith's instigation, the blood elves' anger was ignited. Under the atmosphere, their emotions became irrational. Kill them all! Someone shouted, and the blood elves responded in unison. Yes, kill them all! Kill them all! Kill! 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 Many angry blood elves left the plaza. They quickly rushed back to their homes and took out weapons from the corners of their homes. At the same time, more and more blood elves gathered in the street. They shouted slogans loudly and came to the streets of Nordrassel. Seeing all this, Keith knew that he had achieved his goal. He turned around with a sinister smile and saw the flaming soul floating in the air. Well done. Saul smiled and gave Keith a thumbs up. Read pornographic novels. Please go to GrainWeb without advertisements. Chapter 419. Under the instigation of elders such as Keith, Radcliffe, Tompkin, and Waldron, many blood elf villages were stirred up. They took to the streets and swarmed toward Nordrassel. Novel leaderboard, GrainWeb. The barracks were also in an uproar. The blood elves serving in the army were also mobilized and marched toward the main city of the elves. Panic was spreading, rumors were spreading, and the entire blood elf race was in a frenzy. Originally, some of the respected blood elf elders in the village had some doubts, but under the persuasion of a few members of the Council of Elders, their initial doubts turned into trust. Later on, the rumor became that the white elves, green elves, and dark elves were joining forces to exterminate the blood elves, who were viewed as heretics. Many blood elf elders were still clear-headed, but they were powerless to stop the angry crowd. Countless blood elves began to gather. Due to the political implications and the division of the race, relatives living under the same roof and belonging to different races began to fight each other. The entire elven race was in chaos. The furious blood elves seemed to have lost their minds. They saw the elves of different races as if they were enemies. Countless elves of different races were severely injured, and some even died on the spot. Before this, none of them would have thought that their good neighbors would suddenly become like this. Some of them even died without knowing what had happened. Chaos, it was all chaos. The entire Nordrassel had become a city of chaos. Blood elves from the surrounding villages were constantly rushing over. The barracks were also in chaos. Fortunately, most of the elves were quite powerful. Faced with a sea of crazy blood elves, they could still escape even if they could not defeat them. Some of the smarter ones had already fled. What's that? Celia, who was about to go to the forbidden land of the elves with Aurora to find Undine, pointed to the front and shouted. Aurora's expression froze. she said in surprise. Those are blood elves. So many blood elves. What are they doing there? They seem to be very angry. Ike said in a low voice, the situation in front is not good. What are these blood elves doing? As they spoke, the blood elves discovered the three of them. A blood elf warrior pointed at them and shouted, "There are 2 green elves and 1 dark elf over there. Go and kill them." The blood elf's suggestion was met with the approval of the crowd. They raised their weapons and charged over. Many blood elf mages waved their hands, and countless spells rained down from the sky. What? Aurora, Slya, and Ike's expressions changed drastically. They never thought that a blood elf of the same race would actually attack them. Boom, boom, boom. Countless fire spells exploded around Serene. Serene used the power of nature to form a powerful magic shield, blocking these attacks with great difficulty. On the other side, the powerful blood elf warriors and heavily armored blood elf knights charged towards them. The three of them subconsciously had the same thought. These blood elves have gone mad. Something's not right. Let's leave. Aurora made a prompt decision. She already had a weapon in her hand, but she did not have the courage to shoot an arrow. After all, the blood elves opposite them were their own kind. However, the three of them did not want to hurt the blood elves, but the blood elves did not let them go. Serene's reaction was a little late, and she was already surrounded by the three of them. You? What do you want? Aurora calmed down and asked. Go to hell, dark elf. A blood elf warrior did not give her a chance to speak. Whoosh! A sharp sword was already slashing towards her. Aurora's head tilted back, and the wind from the sword slashed across her forehead. Although she avoided the calamity of having her head cut open, fresh blood flowed down her forehead. The fresh blood in front of her made Aurora sober. She could not help but believe that these blood elves were serious. Serene said angrily, "What's wrong with you? White elves, green elves, dark elves, all of you must die." The blood elf warrior said crazily as he slashed his sword at Serene. Everything happened so suddenly that Serene seemed to be scared out of her wits. She stood there blankly, but did not dodge. Clang! At this moment, Aurora made her move. She did not want to aim her bow at her own kind, but for the first time, she suddenly pulled the stunned Serene back by half a step. At the same time, the bow in her hand shot out like a meteor. Boom! The flame arrow exploded, and the group of blood elves was forced to retreat. Pornographic novel at the same time, Edge was like an angry lion. He transformed into a giant bear and pounced on the blood elves in a frenzy. Druid, it's actually a druid. Everyone, be careful. The blood elf cried out in alarm. Druids were considered a powerful existence among the green elves. Edge, you block the front. We'll retreat as we fight. Aurora said calmly. Edge roared angrily in response. The giant bear form with thick skin and astonishing defense was most suitable as a meat shield. The furious Edge pounced and pounced on the blood elf warrior madly. His bare paws danced and sent the blood elf warrior flying. Serene, who had yet to recover from the shock, also came back to her senses and joined in the attack against the blood elves. She summoned vines and trapped some of the blood elf warriors. At the same time, she transformed into a dryad and threw poisonous spears. The three of them cooperated seamlessly, fighting as they retreated. Even though the blood elves had the advantage in numbers, they could not do anything to them for a while. However, they had yet to leave the encirclement of the blood elves. The blood elves were as stoic as soldiers. Their battle experience and cooperation were outstanding. The blood elf knights with strong defense were at the front, and the blood elf mages were at the back. They pressed down on Aurora and the rest with overwhelming momentum. Sister Aurora, Serene, hurry up and leave. I can't hold them off anymore. Edge was being beaten until he cried out in pain. Although he was powerful, the enemy he was facing was equally powerful. Facing the enemy's advantage in numbers, Edge could not hold on for long. No. If you want to leave, let's leave together. Saria rejected Edge's good intentions. She hardened her heart and began to cast offensive magic. Sister Aurora, there are more and more people. What should we do? Saria asked as she attacked. She saw that her brother Edge was being beaten up by the Blood Elves, who were also fellow Blood Elves. She was so anxious that she cried. Aurora took a deep breath. We have to break out of the encirclement as soon as possible, and then go find Elder Dobin. Although Aurora did not know what had happened to the Blood Elves, she knew that this situation could only be suppressed by mobilizing the army. However, what she did not know was that the Blood Elves in the army were also involved. Keith, Radcliffe, and Tompkin quietly floated in the air, looking at the scene on the ground with satisfaction. Radcliffe gave a thumbs up. Boss is indeed brilliant. Just a little trick, and the entire Blood Elves are in chaos. These Blood Elves are really gullible. They believe whatever others say. A satisfied smile appeared on Keith's face. People who have fallen into madness are blind. They will not be able to distinguish any news. This is the brilliance of politics. The highest level of politics is division. The politics that exists in the family can even cause husband and wife to turn against each other, let alone the entire race. Keith smiled. The Blood Elves who love peace are no exception. This is also because there is a problem with the way the various races get along with each other. This problem was magnified and exploited by us, resulting in today's situation. Of course, the status of the Elder of the Blood Elves also played a decisive role. The Elder Council has supreme authority in the Blood Elves. Who would doubt the words of an Elder of the Blood Elves? Haha. Very good. At this time, a faint voice was heard. When the few people heard that voice, they all bowed. Lord Thor. The flame that came out was Thor. At this moment, he had transformed into a soul shadow. His appearance was similar to Waldron's original appearance. They were of the same race. Thor glanced at the rioting Blood Elves below and smiled. Keith, you have contributed greatly to today's situation. But you also know that what I want is not a broken Blood Elves. This will not benefit us at all. I think, with your wisdom, you should have thought of how to deal with the aftermath, right? Of course, Lord Thor. Keith bowed deeply. If I did not think of a plan to deal with the aftermath, how could I act on my own accord? As he spoke, he paused. The Blood Elves riot is only the first step of my plan. The next step will be to escalate the riot, followed by a civil war. After the civil war, the Blood Elves will gain political power. Next, those defeated will accept our rule. I plan to use the Blood Elves as the foundation to rule the entire Blood Elves. Thor smiled. That's a good idea, but you have to be careful. There's someone who might be able to stop this from happening. Keith smiled. You mean that demigod expert? I've already thought of a plan to deal with her. Thor smiled. Very good, Keith. I know you have never disappointed me. Not now, not in the future. As Thor spoke, his figure slowly transformed and disappeared. Farewell, Lord Thor. Keith, Radcliffe, and Tompkin all bowed and said in unison. At this moment, a figure flew over. It was Waldron. You're back? Keith smiled. How did it go? Ever since Waldron had caused trouble by transforming into his original form, Keith's attitude towards him had become much colder. Waldron naturally felt it too. He could only do his best to prove himself. Lord, it's done. The Blood Elves in the army have begun to revolt. Although some of the Legion commanders still have doubts, they can't suppress the angry soldiers. Good, very good. Keith smiled. Soon, the Blood Elves will enter civil war mode. We also need to prepare for the upcoming political power. The riot continued to spread. Some Blood Elves began to burn down treehouses and kill other elves. The elves, who were also quite powerful, began to gather together to resist. Just as Keith said, the riot began to gradually evolve into a civil war among the elves. No one knew what this war was for. They only knew that the entire elven race had fallen into a state of chaos. Chapter 420. More and more blood elves appeared, and Aurora, Cilia, and Ike were completely surrounded. They fought and retreated, but they were unable to break through the encirclement. Behind them was a solid wall. Novel ranking, grain web, we can't get out. Cilia's voice was anxious. If not for Ike risking his life to save her, she would have been riddled with scars. Aurora's face was tense, and she didn't speak, but her heart sank. Are we really going to die here today? At this time, a sword light attacked, cutting straight at Aurora's arm. Aurora was startled, but she couldn't dodge it for long, and her arm was about to be cut off from her shoulder. Dang! At this critical moment, the sword attack was blocked by someone, saving Aurora's life. Aurora was stunned for a moment, and when she turned around it was Opawira who saved her, but she didn't know why Opawira suddenly appeared here. Sister Opawira! Seeing her once most respected sister, Slia let out a joyful cry, but at this moment, her movements suddenly stopped. Opawira is a blood elf, could it be that she's here to kill us? As if seeing through Cilia's thoughts, Opawira lowered her voice and said, I'm here to save you, quickly rush out with me. Cilia was stunned for a moment, and she didn't dare to believe it. Opawira can be trusted. Aurora calmly said a sentence to exonerate her. Opawira cast a grateful look at Aurora. Follow me! Get out of my way! Opavala bellowed as she brandished her long sword and shot out flames. She instantly cut down several blood elf warriors and opened up a bloody path. Seeing that the one fighting with them was a blood elf knight, those blood elves were clearly stunned for a moment. Many of them recognized Opawira, who had a rather high reputation among the blood elves, and shouted, Opawira, what are you doing? Opawira waved her long sword and said coldly, They are my friends, get out of my way. A blood elf warrior stepped forward. Opawira, don't forget how those white elves, green elves, and dark elves treated us? They even wanted to expel us, and mobilize their army to kill us. You, a blood elf, are not on the side of your fellow elves, but on their side? Opawira smiled proudly. To me, all elves are my fellow elves, and I have never heard of the news of the blood elves being expelled. You have all been deceived, what a joke. How could the news from the first elder of the elf clan, Sir Keith, be fake? Said the blood elf warrior. His words were echoed by everyone else. To them, great Elder Keith, who was also a blood elf, was naturally trustworthy. Opawira, she was unable to confirm the source of the news as at this time, another blood elf mage reprimanded. Opawira, I see that you are our fellow elves, so we will not quibble with your actions this time, but if you don't get out of the way and still stand on their side, then you will be our enemy, and at that time, don't blame us for falling out with you, then come at me. Opawira did not shrink back. If you want to kill my friends, you will have to step over my dead body. Stubborn fool, kill him. The leader of the Blood Elf Knights waved his hand coldly and shouted, and at the same time, all the Blood Elf warriors and knights began to charge, and the mages also began to condense magic. At this time, there was a whoosh, and a huge magic ball flew over at an extremely fast speed, drawing a beautiful trajectory in the air. The strange thing was that the target of this magic ball was not anyone present, but the ground. Boom! The magic ball exploded on the ground, and the blazing flames continued to spread outwards, isolating the blood elves from Opawira, Aurora, Slia, and the others. At the same time, a large amount of smoke and dust rose. Cough, cough, cough. The blood elves were caught off guard and coughed from the smoke and dust. When they came back to their senses, Opawira, the two green elves, and the dark elves had already disappeared. Damn it, they actually ran away. The blood elves were so angry that they stomped their feet. Ian, Deidre, it's you? When they saw the people who had saved them, Opawira and the others widened their eyes in surprise. When did you come? Ian smiled. We also just arrived and saw that you were in danger, hee. It was Deidre who summoned the Earth Elemental to save you. Opawira and the others smiled and thanked him, and Deidre smiled embarrassedly. It's nothing, that magic ball was cast by my brother. Without his restraint, I wouldn't have known how to save you. You don't have to be modest with each other. Slya shouted, looking at Ian. Ian, what's going on? Why do the blood elves seem to have gone crazy, wantonly attacking the elves of other races when they see them? I saw many elves injured by them. Ian pondered for a moment. To be honest, I'm not too sure. I came this time to find out what happened. As he spoke, he glanced at Opawira. Opawira, you came from the Blood Elf village, so you should be more clear about the matter. Opawira nodded. There was a meeting in the village this afternoon. I didn't make it. I also heard from other Blood Elves later that your father, Elder Dobin, and Ninth Elder Waldron had a fight, and not long after, there was news of the White Elves, Green Elves, and Dark Elves joining forces to exterminate the Blood Elves. What? Ian was shocked. There's absolutely no such thing. Someone must be spreading rumors. I also think it's a rumor, but... Opawira hesitated. I heard that this news was said by Great Elder Keith himself, in the square of the Blood Elf village. More than 100,000 Blood Elves heard it. Keith? Great Elder Keith? Ian was stunned, somewhat in disbelief. He actually said that? Deidre said, Brother, we just came from the village. I don't think we've heard such a thing before. We didn't hear it here either. I didn't hear it here either. Aurora and Slya also shook their heads and answered. Opawira was a blood elf, Ian, Deidre were white elves, Aurora was a dark elf, and Slya and Ike were green elves. They belonged to 4 different races. The matter became clear after confirming with each other. Slya was the first to react. Brother Ian, there's something wrong with Great Elder Keith. Ian nodded and took a deep breath. It seems like it, but I don't know what his purpose is. He's already the Great Elder of the Elves. His power has reached the peak. Why would he do this? What good would it do for him? Great Elder Keith, he was the mastermind behind all the current problems. None of the Blood Elves questioned his words, because his identity was there. He was the Great Elder of the Elves. Opawira thought for a while and said, Ian, I think we should go find your father, Elder Dobin, now. Only he can solve this problem. Ian said, Yes, we'll go now. When Ian and the others arrived at Elder Dobin's house, Elder Dobin seemed to be in a hurry to go out. Father! Elder Dobin! Ian and the others called out to Dobin. When Dobin saw them, he frowned. Ian, Princess Slya, I'm afraid I don't have time to greet you. I just received news that there seems to be some signs of instability in a few villages of the Blood Elves. Someone is inciting those Blood Elves. Ian sighed. Father, we just came back from there. The thing you're most worried about is already happening. As he spoke, he told Dobin everything that they had seen. Dobin's body shook. What? It's actually Keith? He actually said that the 3 races are working together to destroy the elves? Where did this news come from? At this time, Dobin's mind flashed. He suddenly gritted his teeth. So that's how it is. They knew that the matter was exposed, so they actually took action first. Ian and the others were stunned. Among them Slya asked, Elder Dobin, who do you mean by they? Dobin's expression was grave. He told everyone what he had secretly seen, after which he took a deep breath. Although I still don't know everything, I can now confirm that those Blood Elf elders are not Blood Elves. They are from an unknown race. They have transformed into Blood Elves. The whole thing is a conspiracy against the elves. What? Everyone was stunned by this shocking news. They couldn't believe their ears. Opavra stuttered, Elder Dobin, is this true? I saw it with my own eyes. It's absolutely true. Dobin nodded affirmatively. I don't have time to accompany you. I have to rush to the Moon Shadow Army's encampment. You can go ahead. What, Moon Shadow Army? Hearing this, Opavra's face turned ghastly pale. Elder Dobin, you intend to mobilize the army to suppress them? That's right. Elder Dobin answered decisively. Why? Why? Tears fell from Opavra's eyes. Those suppressed were all blood elves. Elder Dobin, since you knew of their conspiracy, why didn't you expose their identities? Why did you watch the blood elves pay such a heavy price for being used by them? Dobin let out a long sigh, patting Opavra's shoulder. Opavra, I can understand your feelings, but now I have no other choice but to mobilize the army. Do you think those blood elves who are shrouded in lies and have their minds clouded by anger will still listen to me? After saying this, he didn't say anything else, turned around, and floated away. When Opavra came back to her senses, Dobin was already 5 kilometers away. Once Dobin left, everyone fell silent. They were all stunned by this shocking news. They needed some time to digest it. After a while, Rian raised his head, looked at everyone, and said, "What do we do now?" Aurora bit her lip, looking at the distant horizon. "I want to rescue Ron first." Pornographic novels. After a few hours, with Elder Dobin's efforts, the Moon Shadow Army, Wolf Fong Army, Shadow Army, and the other 8 elven armies rushed to Nordrassel. They were well equipped, carrying elven crossbows that could shoot moonblades from long distances. Their purpose was to suppress these rioting blood elves. At the same time, the blood elves' Blood Flame Army, Sea of Fire Army, and the other 2 armies also rushed to the battlefield. The elves' civil war was about to break out. To see the first commercial-free article, please go to www.grain.com. Chapter 421. There were more and more blood elves, and Aurora, Cilia, and Ike were surrounded. They fought and retreated, but they were unable to break through. Behind them was a solid wall. Novel ranking, Grain Web, we can't get out. Cilia's voice was anxious. If Ike had not risked his life to save her, she would have been covered in wounds. Aurora's face was tense, and she did not speak, but her heart sank. Are we really going to die here today? At this time, a sword light attacked, cutting straight at Aurora's arm. Aurora was shocked, but she could not dodge it, and her arm was about to be chopped off. Dang! At this critical moment, the sword attack was blocked by someone, saving Aurora's life. Aurora was stunned for a moment. Looking back, it was Opawira who had saved her, but she did not know why Opawira suddenly appeared here. Sister Opawira! Seeing her once most respected sister, Slia let out a cheerful cry, but at this moment, her movements suddenly stopped. Opawira is a blood elf. Could it be that she is here to kill us? It seems to be a pornographic novel. As if seeing through Cilia's thoughts, Opawira lowered her voice and said, "I am here to save you, quickly rush out with me." Cilia was stunned for a moment. She did not dare to believe it. Opawira can be trusted. Aurora calmly said a sentence to exonerate her. Opawira cast a grateful look at Aurora. "Follow me! Get out of my way!" Opawira shouted, brandishing her long sword, shooting flames, and cutting a few blood elf warriors, killing a bloody path. Seeing that the one fighting with them was a blood elf knight, those blood elves were clearly stunned. Many of them recognized Opawira, who had a high reputation among the blood elves, and shouted, "Opawira, what are you doing?" Opavila waved her sword and said coldly, "They are my friends. Get out of my way." A blood elf warrior stepped forward. "Opavila, don't forget how the white elves, green elves, and dark elves treated us? They even wanted to expel us and mobilize their army to kill us. You, a blood elf, aren't standing on the side of your own kind, but on their side?" Opavila smiled proudly. "To me, all elves are my compatriot. Also, I have never heard of the news of the blood elves being banished. You have all been deceived, what a joke. How could the news from the elven race's chief Elder Keith be fake?" The blood elf warrior said. His words were echoed by everyone else. To them, great Elder Keith, who was also a blood elf, was naturally trustworthy. Opavira was at a loss for words. She could not verify the source of the news. At this time, another blood elf mage reprimanded, "O Pavila, I see that you are a compatriot. We will not quibble with your actions this time, but if you don't get out of the way and continue to stand on their side, then you will be our enemy. Don't blame us for falling out with you, then come." Opavila did not shrink back. "If you want to kill my friends, you will have to step over my dead body. Stubborn fool, kill him." The leading blood elf knight waved his hand coldly and shouted. At the same time, all the blood elf warriors and knights began to charge, and the mages also began to condense magic. At this time, with a whoosh, a huge magic ball flew over at an extremely fast speed, drawing a beautiful trajectory in the air. The strange thing was that the target of this magic ball was not anyone present, but the ground. Boom! The magic ball exploded on the ground, and the blazing flames continued to spread outwards, isolating the blood elves from Opavila, Aurora, Slaya, and the others. At the same time, a large amount of smoke and dust rose. Cough, cough, cough. The blood elves were caught off guard and coughed from the smoke and dust. By the time they recovered, Opavila, the two green elves, and the night elves had already disappeared. Damn it, they actually ran away. The blood elves were so angry that they stomped their feet. "Ian, Deidre, it's you?" When they saw the people who had saved them, Opavila and the others widened their eyes in surprise. "When did you get here?" Ian smiled. "We also just arrived and saw that you were in danger. Hee, it was Deidre who summoned the earth elemental to save you." Opavila and the others smiled and thanked him. Deidre smiled embarrassedly. "It's nothing, that magic ball was cast by my brother. Without him restraining it, I wouldn't know how to save you." "Don't be modest with each other." Slaya shouted and looked at Ian. "Ian, what's going on? Why do the blood elves seem to have gone crazy, wantonly attacking the elves of other races when they see them? I saw that many elves were injured by them." Ian muttered to himself. "To be honest, I'm not too sure either. I came here this time to find out what happened." As he spoke, he glanced at Opavila. "Opavila, you came from the Blood Elf village, so you should be clearer about the situation." Opavila nodded. "There was a meeting in the village this afternoon, and I didn't make it. I also heard from other blood elves later that your father, Elder Dobin, and the ninth elder, Waldron, had a fight. Not long after, there was news of the white elves, green elves, and night elves joining forces to exterminate the blood elves." "What?" Ian was shocked. "There's absolutely no such thing. Someone must be spreading rumors." "I also think it's a rumor, but—" Opavila hesitated. "I heard that this news was said by Great Elder Keith himself. In the square of the Blood Elf village, more than 100,000 blood elves listened." "Keith? Great Elder Keith?" Ian froze for a moment, somewhat unable to believe it. He actually said that?" Deidre said. "Brother, we just came from the village, and I don't think we've ever heard of such a thing." "We haven't here either." "I haven't either." Aurora and Slaya also shook their heads and replied. Opavila was a blood elf, Ian Deidre was a white elf, Aurora was a night elf, and Slaya and Ike were green elves. They belonged to 4 different races, and after confirming with each other, the matter became clear. Slaya was the first to react. "Brother Ian, there's something wrong with Great Elder Keith." Ian nodded and took a deep breath. "It seems like it, but I don't know what his purpose is. He's already the Great Elder of the Elves, and his authority has reached the peak. Why would he do this? What good would it do him?" Great Elder Keith was the mastermind behind all the current problems. No blood elf questioned his words, because his identity was there. He was the Great Elder of the Elves. Opavila thought for a moment and said, "Ian, I think we should go find your father, Elder Dobin. Now, only he can solve this problem." Ian said, "Yes, we'll go now." When Ian and the others arrived at Elder Dobin's house, Elder Dobin seemed to be in a hurry to go out. Father! Elder Dobin! Ian and the others called out to Dobin. When Dobin saw them, he frowned. Ian, Princess Slya, I'm afraid I don't have time to greet you. I just received news that a few villages of the Blood Elves seem to be showing signs of instability. Someone is inciting the Blood Elves. Ian sighed. Father, we just came back from there. The thing you're most worried about is already happening. As he spoke, he told Dobin everything that they had seen. Dobin's body shook. What? It's actually Keith? He actually said that the three races are working together to destroy the elves? Where did this news come from? At this moment, a thought flashed in Dobin's mind. He suddenly gritted his teeth. So that's how it is. They know that they've been exposed, so they actually acted first. Elian and the others were stunned. Among them, Celia asked, Elder Dobin, who are you referring to by them? Dobin's expression was grave as he told everyone what he had secretly seen. After speaking, he took a deep breath. Although I'm still not clear about everything, I can now confirm that those Blood Elf elders are not Blood Elves. They come from an unknown race and have transformed into Blood Elves. The whole thing is a conspiracy against the elves. What? Everyone was stunned by this shocking news. They couldn't believe their ears. Opavra stuttered and asked, Elder Dobin, is this true? I saw it with my own eyes. It's absolutely true. Dobin nodded affirmatively. I don't have time to accompany you. I have to rush to the Moon Shadow Legion's encampment. Help yourselves. What, Moon Shadow Legion? When Opavra heard this, her face turned ghastly pale. Elder Dobin, you intend to mobilize the army to suppress them? That's right. Elder Dobin answered decisively. Why? Opavra shed tears in a daze. Those suppressed were all Blood Elves. Elder Dobin, since you knew about their conspiracy, why didn't you expose their identities? Why did you watch the Blood Elves pay such a heavy price for being used by them? Dobin sighed deeply and patted Opavra's shoulder. Opavra, I can understand your feelings. But now, I have no other choice but to mobilize the army. Do you think those Blood Elves who are shrouded in lies and have their minds clouded by anger will still listen to me? After speaking, he didn't say anything else and turned to leave. When Opavra came back to her senses, Dobin was already 5 kilometers away. After Dobin left, everyone fell silent. They were all stunned by this shocking news and needed some time to digest it. After a while, Rian raised his head and looked at everyone. Then, he said, What do we do now? Aurora bit her lip and looked at the distant horizon. I want to rescue Ron first. After a few hours, with Elder Dobin's efforts, the Moon Shadow Legion, Wolf Fang Legion, Shadow Legion, and the other 8 Elven legions formed an alliance and rushed to Nordrassel. They were well equipped and carried elven crossbows that could shoot moonblades from long distances. Their purpose was to suppress these rioting Blood Elves. At the same time, the Blood Elves' Blood Flame Legion, Sea of Fire Legion, and the other 2 legions also rushed to the battlefield. A civil war among the elves was about to break out. To see the first commercial-free article, please visit www.grain.com. Chapter 422. Just then, the door opened with a creak, and a ray of light shone through the dark dungeon. Grain Web, however, it was not the elves who came in to deliver food, but Aurora, Slya, and the rest. Ron. Sister Shea. Aurora saw Ron locked up and shouted in surprise. Aurora! Shea and the rest's anxious voices came from the darkness. Come and save us! Don't worry, we're coming to save you. Aurora ran to Ron's cage, twisted the mechanism, and put the cage down. Ron. Aurora! Once the cage was put down, the 2 of them clasped their hands tightly together, and their faces were filled with excitement. Aurora reached out and pinched the wooden bars on the side of the cage. This is Eleno's wood, and it's extremely hard. Most people can't open it, but Ike is looking for the key, and he'll bring it over in a while. I'm sorry for making you suffer. Slia bowed deeply. I'm sorry for the unfair treatment you've received. Ron smiled magnanimously. Forget it, I didn't take it to heart. At this time, a voice came from the darkness, and it was full of surprise. You? Your Princess Slia? Slia turned around and looked, and her mouth was wide open in surprise. Elder Weiss, why are you here? Ron was a little surprised. He did not expect Slia to know Elder Weiss, but he thought it was normal. After all, they were both green elves. Elder Weiss smiled, and his smile was a little awkward. I made a small mistake, and I'm locked up here. Right, why are you here? Slia replied, I'm here to save people, and they're all my friends. I see. Elder Weiss smiled, and suddenly his face became serious. These people have committed a crime, so they've been locked up here by Great Elder Keith. Princess Slia, I don't want to criticize you, but what you're doing is against the laws of the elves, and I advise you to stop. Slia smiled. Elder Weiss, you don't know this, but Keith is not an elf at all, and he has no right to be the Great Elder. This is a complete scam, so I don't have to obey his laws. What? Elder Weiss was shocked. You're saying that Great Elder Keith is not an elf? What's going on? Slia. Something's wrong. Just as Celia was about to answer, she saw Ike running in hurriedly. When he saw her, he said anxiously, Celia, bad news, I can't find the key. Hearing that, Celia became nervous. What should we do? They can't be locked up here for long. Now that everyone has left. Aurora was still unwilling to give up. Ike, you really can't find the key? Ike replied, I searched everywhere outside, inside and out, but I couldn't find the key. When Ron and the others heard this, their eyes were filled with disappointment. Wait a minute, Your Highness Princess Slia. Wes suddenly rushed up and grabbed the edge of the cage with both hands. He pressed his face against the cage and said anxiously, You said that Great Elder Keith is not an elf at all. What's going on? Outside. What's going on outside? When Slia heard this, she hurriedly told Weiss everything she knew and finally said, Elder Weiss, the entire Blood Elf race has been incited by Keith's lies, and most of the Blood Elves have participated in the riot, and now it's all chaotic outside, no wonder. No wonder. So that's it. Weiss muttered, as if he was in a daze. This guy got rid of me in order to plant his cronies in here. So, my so-called corruption case was also his doing. So, the whole thing was a conspiracy. Bastard. Suddenly, Weiss roared, his face twisted with anger. Keith. So, it was all your doing, to bring disaster to the entire Blood Elf race. I will never let you go. Weiss's aura rose sharply due to his anger, and an extremely powerful force suddenly erupted. It was the powerful power of the sacred domain. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but be shocked. This force was too terrifying. Roar! Weiss let out a beast-like roar, and then, his body began to change. Weiss's body continued to grow, and his clothes were torn apart. At the same time, scales grew on his hands and feet, his neck elongated, and a long tail grew from his back. Bang! His huge body broke the small cage, and the cage made of Elinos wood could no longer contain him. It suddenly exploded, and the fragments scattered. Boom! Weissi's gigantic body fell to the ground, creating a plume of smoke and dust. Ron, Shea, and the rest were stunned. This is a dragon? His neck was long, and there were a few horns on his head. His body was a beautiful green color, and his 4 huge claws stepped on the ground. 2 huge wings extended from his back. At this moment, Weiss had turned into a powerful flying dragon. Dragon Druid! I didn't think that what was written in the books was true. When a druid's power is strong enough, they can transform into a flying dragon. Even the legendary giant dragons. Ron stared blankly at the majestic and strong dragon. This green dragon was a real flying dragon. He was on a completely different level from the ground dragons that the Dragon Knights in the Soaring Dragon Academy rode. Roar! Elder Weiss, who had turned into a flying dragon, turned his head and roared. He extended his huge claws and waved them lightly. Ka-ka-ka! A few crisp sounds were heard, and Ron, Shea, Becerra, and Rainey's cages were all shattered. Elder Weiss's control of his strength was extremely precise. The huge claws broke the cages, but they didn't hurt the people inside. Indeed, as Elder Weiss said, when one's power reached the sacred domain, breaking the cages was as easy as blowing off dust. Thank you, Elder Weiss. Ron heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that they were finally out. Celia and Aurora regained their senses and immediately thanked Weiss. Elder Weiss nodded. I've let you guys out. Be careful. Celia anxiously asked, Elder Weiss, where are you going? Where? Elder Weiss, who had transformed into a dragon, revealed a smile. Of course, I'm going to find that fellow to settle the score. As he spoke, his huge wings flapped violently, causing a gust of wind. His huge body leaped high into the air and violently crashed into the roof. Boom! A huge hole was broken in the dungeon. The furious Elder Weiss directly rushed out and quickly disappeared into the horizon. Ron, what should we do? Looking at the empty dungeon, Aurora regained her senses and asked. Patting the dust off, Ron thought for a while and said, I think we should go out and see what's going on. Oh right, we still have to meet up with Kay. We haven't been back for so long. Kay must be waiting anxiously at home. Ron walked around the dungeon, trying to find his own space bags, as well as Shea and the others. These space bags contained their weapons, potions and so on, as well as the zombies that Ron had refined. However, he couldn't find them after looking around. He didn't know where these space bags had gone. In the end, he could only give up and leave with Aurora and the others. On the battlefield of Nordrassel, the Blood Elves and the allied forces of the three races were in a mess. Surprisingly, the allied forces of the three races were actually at a disadvantage, being beaten back by the Blood Elves who outnumbered them. Cade asked in a strange tone, Boss, the Blood Elves' victory is certainly worth celebrating, but the other side has so many people. Why is the result of the battle so surprising, isn't it? Keith interrupted him with a smile and said, The reason is very simple. The allied forces of the three races seem to have a lot of humans, but in fact, they were only ordered to suppress them. Because their opponents were the Blood Elves of their race, many of them were fearful and couldn't fight freely. On the other hand, the Blood Elves didn't have any concerns because they knew that if they failed, they might face the consequences of being exterminated. Comparing the two, this result is not surprising at all. Waldron nodded and suddenly understood. I see. At this time, Keith smiled and looked at the sky. However, compared to the battle on the ground, the battle in the air between the Sacred Domain powerhouses worries me. We have too few Sacred Domain powerhouses on our side. In comparison, the three races have many Sacred Domain powerhouses. It seems that the four of us will have to take action. When Waldron heard this, he rubbed his hands together and laughed. That's good. I've long disliked Dobin. This is a good opportunity to teach him a lesson. Keith smiled, and not long after, the four figures shot into the sky like lightning. Dobin and Marlowe were fighting in the air. Marlowe was using pure fire magic, but Dobin was using fire and water magic. The two sides bombarded each other with magic in the air, and it was difficult to determine the winner. Suddenly, Dobin's heart skipped a beat. He didn't have time to think and immediately cast Ice Shield. Boom! An explosive fireball exploded in front of him. It was blocked by the ice shield, but the powerful impact still injured his internal organs. It's you. Dobin looked and saw that the one who launched the sneak attack was none other than Great Elder Keith. Beside him were Radcliffe, Tomkin, and Waldron. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Dobin angrily clenched his fist. "Keith, you bastard, everything here is your doing. Who are you? What race are you from? What are your intentions for messing up our elven race?" Keith obviously wouldn't admit it. He smiled. "Great Elder Dobin, I don't understand what you're saying. You know what you're doing, don't throw dirty water on me. Dobin was so angry he couldn't find a place to vent his anger. Seeing Keith launch a sneak attack, Marlowe's expression was a bit displeased. "Keith, as the Great Elder, you should act like one. Sneak attacks are despicable. Also, although you're the Great Elder, it's not up to you to interfere in the matters between me and Dobin." Keith chuckled. "Great Elder Marlowe, you're wrong. Normally, I would disdain joining hands with anyone, but now isn't the time to be swayed by emotions. We have to defeat this guy, so joining hands is necessary." When Dobin heard this, his heart suddenly trembled. If the two of them joined hands, he would only be able to escape in defeat. Although he hadn't fought with Keith before as the Great Elder, his strength naturally wouldn't be lacking. At the very least, he wouldn't be below himself. Marlowe didn't answer. At this time, a deep dragon roar came from the sky. This roar seemed to have a strong penetrating force, shaking everyone's eardrums. Then, a black dot appeared on the horizon, quickly approaching from afar. That's... Dobin's face was full of surprise. He knew who had come when he heard the voice. Great Elder Weiss. Sure enough, a huge flying dragon arrived in front of everyone in the blink of an eye. Great Elder Weiss, the powerful dragon druid, had finally arrived at the battlefield. Please go to www.grain.com to see the first commercial-free video. Chapter 423. Wes, you're finally out. Dobin's face was full of excitement. Novel rankings, Grainweb. Wes growled. I came out a little late. I hope it's not too late. It's good that you're out. Now we can fight side by side. Dobin said. That guy came out too? Wasn't he locked up in prison? Keith was shocked to see Wes. He didn't think that Wes would actually appear here. Keith naturally knew that the small cage couldn't hold Elder Wes, a powerhouse of the sacred domain. However, these elves were all one-track-minded creatures. They wouldn't come out once they were locked up, but Elder Wes had come out. Could it be that he had sensed something? However, Keith naturally wasn't afraid of Wes. They were both powerhouses of the sacred domain. Who was afraid of who? Keith's face darkened. Wes, you actually ran out? Did you forget the crime you committed? You still haven't figured out what happened, yet you ran out like this. This is an act of betrayal. At this time, Wes spoke. Very good, Keith. You're still used to accusing me. If I didn't know your true identity, I would still be fooled by you and foolishly locked up in prison, Wes grinned. Suddenly, his expression changed and became stern. You're definitely not a blood elf. Who are you? What's your purpose in coming to the elven territory? Keith smiled. Wes, I don't know what rumors you've heard, but I won't say any nonsense. I just want to ask you one thing. Do you have any evidence for everything you've said? Wes narrowed his eyes. He used the power of nature to carefully examine Keith, but he couldn't find anything suspicious. A trace of a smile appeared on Keith's face. Since he dared to come to the elven territory and pretend to be a blood elf, he naturally wasn't afraid of being investigated by the elves. Otherwise, he would have been exposed long ago. Although one could change one's appearance, one's power couldn't be changed. Only the power of blood elves was close to the power of destruction they used. This was why they liked to pretend to be blood elves. Only then could they not be discovered. How is it? Did you see anything? Keith smiled and said, I put you in jail based on evidence. Do you have any evidence to prove that you're spreading rumors about me? At this moment, Dobin coldly rebuked, Wes, don't waste your breath on him. He is the culprit behind all this. Roar! Wes was enraged. He roared and pounced at Keith. Keith sneered. Are you serious? Hee, I'm not afraid of you. As he spoke, he made a grabbing motion with his hand, and a ball of raging flame appeared in his palm. Boom! The flames in the sky exploded like flowers, and the blazing flames scorched the surrounding air. Wes couldn't help but show weakness. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of dragon breath. The intensity of the battle between the strong warriors of the sacred domain was far beyond imagination. With the addition of Wes, Dobin's morale was greatly boosted. As a powerful dragon druid, even though he had transformed into a flying dragon, his ability was no different from a real one. On the ground, the Blood Elf army and the allied army of the three races had already started to charge at each other, engaging in close combat. Library 56 and Aurora had also started to make their move. Shea's weapon was taken away, but she still managed to snatch a long sword and started to fight with the Blood Elves. Basara and Rainey didn't have the strength to fight. They were so scared that their faces were pale. They clung tightly to Ron, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. At the same time, the number of Blood Elves increased and quickly surrounded them. The Blood Elf magicians had also rushed to the scene and started to release magic. Soon, they couldn't hold on any longer. We're finished. Looking at the hundreds of fire magic bullets in the sky, everyone's heart sank. Just then, a huge figure descended from the sky and landed heavily on the ground. Boom! The ground was smashed into pieces, and a large amount of smoke and dust rose. At this time, the fire magic bullets had also arrived. Boom, 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 almost 100 magic bullets landed on the huge figure, creating a large amount of sparks. The huge figure didn't even make a sound and took all the magic bullet. Everyone saw and shouted in surprise. The person who came was none other than Kay, who had transformed into the Golden Beaumont. Along with her were Ian, Dietrich, and Opavila. Beaumont. It's actually Beaumont. A Blood Elf shouted in shock, his voice filled with fear. It's an adult Beaumont. His ability has already reached the sacred domain. Let's run quickly. Another Blood Elf warrior shouted. Although the Blood Elf warriors were angry, it didn't mean that they didn't have good eyesight. They saw Kay's overwhelming power. Who else could it be but a sacred domain warrior? In the face of an undefeatable sacred domain warrior, and without other sacred domain warriors holding them back, they wisely chose to retreat. In the blink of an eye, the large group of Blood Elves had completely retreated. Count yourselves lucky. Kay didn't chase after them. She immediately transformed back into a teenager and shouted, Sister, Rainey, Brother Ron, are you guys okay? I'm fine. Basara smiled sweetly and patted Kay's head lovingly. She sighed and said, My Kay has grown up and knows how to protect Sister. Kay tilted her head and smiled. I will always remember that when I was weak, it was Sister who saved me. At this time, Elian and Deidre also walked over. Elian's expression was solemn. Things are a little difficult now. Those Blood Elves heard the news from somewhere and are rushing over from various villages. There are more and more people, especially many sacred domain warriors, including Blood Elves and elves from the three races. Even many sacred domain warriors who lived in seclusion have come out. Now, Nordashiel is in a mess, Cilia asked. Elian, you've always been the most resourceful. What do you think we should do now? Elian pondered for a moment. The only thing we can do now is to suppress these sacred domain warriors, and only the High Priestess can do it. The High Priestess Undine was a sacred domain warrior. As long as she was willing to stand out, the entire elf race's chaotic situation would end. That's right. Now, only the High Priestess can deal with this situation, especially those sacred domain warriors. Opavera nodded in agreement. Elian took a deep breath. The forbidden land of the elves is very far from here. The High Priestess has been living in seclusion and might not know what's going on here. I think we should send someone to the forbidden land of the elves to send a message. Elian paused and asked, "Who's going?" "Me. I'll go." Cilia and Aurora both raised their hands high. Cilia glanced at Aurora and said, "This trip concerns the safety of the elves. As the princess of the elves, I should go." "Let me go, pornographic novel. She's my grandmother," Aurora said. "It's a long journey to the forbidden land of the elves, and along the way, we might encounter blood elves coming from all directions. So, this task of sending a message won't be easy, and it might even be dangerous." Elian glanced at Cilia and Aurora and shook his head. "You've been through a series of battles and have a lot of injuries. Even if you're healed, you won't be able to recover your strength in a short period of time. The two of you aren't suitable for this task." "Then who should we send?" Dietrich asked. They had all been through fierce battles. Elian's gaze swept across everyone. "Now there are only two suitable people. One is Beaumont and Kay, and the other is Ron. However, Kay has to stay behind to protect us. Otherwise, if we encounter the blood elves from the sacred domain, we won't be able to fight them. Ron, you should go." "Okay." Ron nodded and said, "I still remember the way to the forbidden land of the elves." "That's good." Elian smiled and nodded. Cilia's eyes were brimming with tears. "Ron, you must invite the High Priest as soon as possible. If he's late, I don't know how many elves will lose their lives." Ron's eyes were full of determination. "Don't worry, Cilia, I'll do my best." "Ron, be careful," Aurora said with concern before leaving. After parting with Cilia and the others, Ron rode the gargoyle into the sky and soon became a small dot. Looking at the departing Ron, Elian said, "Everyone, we can't stay idle. Let's go. We'll go to Nordrassil and help them settle the situation as soon as possible." Everyone agreed loudly. Ka, Ron rode the skeleton warrior through the woods. He disliked the gargoyle's flying speed, so he jumped down early and walked on foot. It had to be said that the skeleton warrior with the skeleton acceleration spell was much faster on the ground than the gargoyle flying in the sky. A few crows constantly flew through the air, vigilantly watching every movement on the ground. Elian's worry was reasonable. Along the way, Ron met several groups of blood elves. Their faces were full of anger, and they had weapons in their hands. They came out of the village and headed in the direction of Nordrassil. After discovering them, Ron avoided them. If he could not avoid them, he would hide. Once he was discovered, the consequences would be very troublesome. The most important thing now was time. Ron did not have so much time to waste on the road. Ron was very fast. After a few hours, he had crossed a few mountains and was getting closer to the forbidden land of the elves. "If I remember correctly, after crossing this mountain, I'll reach the island in the middle of the lake. Not far from the island is the forbidden land." Ron reached out and wiped his sweat. He looked at the sky and his heart trembled. "It's getting late. I have to speed up," Ron was thinking when suddenly, a beam of energy shot out from the grass and went straight for the crows in the sky. Caw! The crow was shot directly. With a strange cry, its body turned into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared. Ron was shocked and shouted coldly, "Who is it? Who's there? Come out." "Hee, I thought someone was spying on you with a surveillance spell." "So it's you." At this time, a voice slowly came out. A figure slowly appeared from behind the tree. He had a hostile smile on his face. "Ron, long time no see. It's you?" Ron also recognized the person and was shocked. Please go to www.grain.com to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 424. The person was none other than Firth, who was once in the same group as Ron. As part of the Elven army, he was ordered to guard the island in the middle of the lake. He was scouting the surrounding area when he met Ron. Jean-Gon, Grainweb. Ron's eyes were full of vigilance. Judging from the other party's attack just now, he obviously didn't come with good intentions. He composed himself and asked, "What are you doing here? Why did you stop me?" Firth looked at Ron with a hint of hostility. "Ever since Aurora returned from the human world, I've always felt that there was something wrong with her. I only found out later that she fell in love with a human, but I didn't expect this human to betray her." Firth smiled slightly. "But I didn't expect that person to be you. You're that despicable human." He suddenly raised his voice. Hearing this, Ron basically understood. Firth had always liked Aurora. Ron knew it when they were in the other plane together, but he didn't recognize Aurora at that time. Ron took a deep breath and looked at Firth quietly. "What are you trying to say?" Firth's face darkened. "It's very simple. Ron, I want you to leave her." "Impossible." Ron heard this and rejected flatly. "You're not worthy of her." Firth suddenly shouted and stared coldly at Ron. "Ron, you're a human. You don't understand. You'll never understand. We elves are a race that values loyalty. A playboy like you has no right to love her." As if frightened by Firth's voice, a flock of birds flew over their heads. Firth glared with bloodshot eyes as if he wanted to tear Ron apart. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Ron sighed. "Firth, I can understand how you feel, but unfortunately, I can't do what you want." "Hee." Firth sneered. "You will do it, and I will help you do it." As Firth spoke, he slowly pulled out 2 short blades from his interspatial bag. He sneered and licked his lip. Deep killing intent could be seen in his eyes. Ron frowned. "What do you want?" "It's very simple." Firth sneered. "I just have to kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, Firth's body suddenly flashed and disappeared from where he was standing. Then, the shiny short blade went straight for Ron's neck. Ron was already on guard against this guy. His reaction was very fast. He tilted his head slightly and dodged the incoming dagger. At the same time, he summoned a bone shield to protect his body. "Stop, you!" Just as Ron spoke, the short blade pierced towards him again. As an elite assassin, Firth's strength had already reached the master level. His speed was very fast, and with invisibility, his agile figure appeared and disappeared in the forest, attacking Ron like a storm. Boom! 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 2 figures crossed each other in the forest. Their strength surged in the surroundings, and sparks flew every time they clashed. The battle between the two did not have much movement, but every time they clashed, it was extremely thrilling. Ron came empty-handed and did not bring any weapons. He had no choice but to summon a bone shield and a bone spear. With a shield in one hand and a spear in the other, he fought with Firth. Without the support of a weapon, Ron's overall strength decreased by a lot. Firth, on the other hand, seemed to be in a killing frenzy as he crazily attacked Ron. His speed was very fast, and every move was fatal. Bone prison. Ron forced Firth to retreat, and at the same time trapped him in the bone prison. His face darkened as he said, "Firth, I have an urgent matter to attend to in the Elven Forbidden Land to find High Priestess Undine. I don't have time to tangle with you, so don't make things difficult for me. You're a human, what right do you have to enter the Elven Forbidden Land?" Firth smiled coldly, and looked at the bone prison with disdain. "This cage made of bones is very sturdy, but unfortunately, you can't trap me." After saying that, his figure flashed and disappeared from the bone prison. Not long after, his body appeared behind a tree. This guy's strength is not simple. Ron took a deep breath and waved the bone spear in his hand, coldly confronting Firth. Firth smiled. "Ron, your strength is not bad. If you use those strange necromancy magic, perhaps I won't be your opponent at all. However, you didn't bring your space bag with you today. Firth had fought with Ron's team in another plane before, so he knew everything about Ron like the back of his hand, especially that sacred domain powerhouse's corpse. He knew that he was no match for him. However, Firth had been carefully observing Ron, and only showed himself when he saw that he didn't bring his space bag with him. Ron snorted coldly. Even if I don't control the corpse, I can still defeat you. Then give it a try. Firth smiled, and he spread his hands slightly, and a powerful force erupted from his body. At this time, something happened that shocked Ron. Firth's body twisted and gradually became blurry. Not long after, his body split into 2, then into 4, and then into 4. What? Ron was shocked. What kind of magic was this? This is my skill as a high-level elite assassin, shadow clone technique. Ron, have a good taste of it. Firth finished speaking, and the 4 bodies jumped at the same time, attacking Ron from different directions. The same clothes, the same weapons, and even the same strength. Ron couldn't tell which one was real and which one was fake. Just as he was hesitating, Firth arrived. Ding! Ron dodged Firth's dagger. At this time, he felt pain in his body, and he saw that the other Firth had already stabbed a dagger into his thigh. Ron screamed and endured the pain to counterattack. However, Firth smiled coldly, and his figure disappeared. Watch carefully, Ron. You will die under my sword. Firth's voice came from the void. At this time, his 2 doppelgangers had both disappeared. Ron clenched his teeth and looked around, but he couldn't see Firth's figure. Bastard, come out if you have the guts! Ron cursed. As soon as his voice fell, Firth appeared above his head, holding a dagger, and fiercely stabbed down. Ron immediately used Shadowmist, and his figure disappeared. However, Firth seemed to have seen through his position, and as soon as he appeared, he used his high speed to attack. Ron finally realized the power of this elite assassin's shadow doppelganger skill. Although he knew that 3 of them were illusions, and only 1 was real, Ron felt as if he was facing 4 Firths. It made him run for his life, and it was impossible to guard against. Without holding back, Ron was stabbed in the knee again. Firth's tactics were extremely sinister and effective. He saw the opportunity, quickly attacked, and whether it hit or not, he would escape. This was the essence of an assassin, and coupled with the innate stealth skill of the Night Elves, it was no wonder that everyone said that the Night Elves were natural assassins. At this moment, Ron was extremely depressed. His attacks on Firth had no effect, and his undead were also useless. Firth could easily pass through his undead and directly take his head. Firth's speed was too fast, and at the same time, Ron could only see a vague shadow. Moreover, this shadow might not be real, and if he wasn't careful, his head would be separated from his body. The 4 ghostly figures quickly shuttled through the forest, constantly attacking Ron. Firth sneered. He was slowly killing Ron. Not long after, Ron was stabbed in the abdomen. If the sword had been a bit off, Ron was afraid that he wouldn't have survived. At this moment, his body was covered in blood. His abdomen and thighs were dripping with blood, and his situation was extremely dangerous. This can't go on, I have to find a way to break his doppelganger. Ron clenched his teeth as he thought. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. Got it! Ron, this time you're dead. Phil grinned hideously. His figure closed in again. Unlike the illusory figure just now, this body was real. The sharp dagger flashed with cold light as it went straight for Ron's heart. Here it comes. Ron was delighted. Firth didn't expect that the words he blurted out would expose his real body. The shadow couldn't speak. Bang! The tip of the sword pierced through the flesh, and the dagger smoothly pierced Ron's body. Ron slightly leaned to the side and the dagger pierced his arm. Huh! Firth felt that something was wrong. This attack was too smooth, as if Ron deliberately let him stab him. He suddenly raised his head, and just happened to see Ron's strange smile. He cried out in his heart, and at the same time quickly withdrew. Soul pain. At this time, Ron finally found an opportunity to use a soul attack. At such a close distance, Firth couldn't dodge at all. Firth only felt a piercing pain in his soul. This kind of pain was indescribable, and it went all the way to his bones. His mind went blank, and his body also paused for a moment. At this time, Ron, who had gathered all his strength, suddenly stabbed out with the bone spear in his hand. Everything was over. The sun shone down diagonally from the sky, and a long shadow was drawn out on Firth's body. Firth painfully clutched his shoulder, and blood continuously seeped out from his black soft leather armor. His doppelganger was broken, and he had an expression of disbelief. Why? How could you see through my movements? It's very simple. Ron's expression was calm. Your words betrayed your position, and I knew that your doppelganger was real. I see. I just learned the shadow doppelganger not long ago, so I didn't notice this detail. Firth nodded and slowly raised his head, staring intently at Ron. You clearly had the chance just now, so why didn't you kill me? Ron smiled. It's very simple, I don't like to kill people. Besides, Firth, even if there are some misunderstandings between us, I've always treated you as my friend. Friend? Firth murmured, his eyes slightly red. At this moment, he finally knew that he had been defeated. He had been completely defeated. Not only had he been defeated in terms of strength, but he had also been defeated in terms of his opponent's breadth of mind and bearing. Ron's last words had made him feel extremely ashamed. Ron looked at Firth, sighed and said, Firth, let's end the grudge between us. Now, the Blood Elves are rioting and attacking Nordrassil, and Elder Dobin has also sent troops to suppress them. The sacred domain powerhouses of several races are also fighting. What? Firth was shocked. What's going on? He had been stationed at the island in the middle of the lake, and knew nothing about what was happening outside. Ron told Firth what had happened, and Firth's expression became solemn, and he remained silent. At this moment, Ron said, So, I have to find the High Priest to settle all of this. Firth, my time is tight, so I won't accompany you to heal. Think about it, you should be able to find the Moonwell nearby. Ron said hurriedly, and at the same time, he quickly left. Wait. Firth called out to Ron. What's wrong? Ron turned around. Firth pondered for a moment and said, I know a path that can lead to the Elven Forbidden Land faster, follow me. Chapter 425. Firth was right. It was much closer to the Elves' Forbidden Land if they took the shortcut. Of course, they could fly in the air, but Ron's gargoyle was obviously not that powerful. This is as far as I can send you. I can't go in like you, Firth said to Ron when they arrived at the edge of the Forbidden Land. His eyes were full of envy. If he was the grandson-in-law of High Priestess Undine, he would have no problem going in. Thanks. Ron nodded. He did not say much and turned to walk into the Forbidden Land. The most important thing now was to hurry. They could not wait any longer. Ron successfully found the hut where Undine lived. For the past few days, Undine had been wearing different patterns from Cove 50 SIXS library. Everyone had a ferocious look on their faces, and there were 4 sharp canine teeth in the 2 rows of teeth in their mouths. Ah, what is that? Who is he? We've been deceived. When Keith and the other 3 revealed their true appearances, everyone was in an uproar. They were all stunned. What appeared in front of them were not Blood Elves, but a race that they had never seen before. This time, the Blood Elves were enraged and shouted, You're not elders. Who are you? Why do you want to harm us? At this time, the Blood Elves realized that they had been deceived. The three races working together to expel the Blood Elves and killing the Blood Elves were all rumors. It was all a conspiracy by Keith and the others. In fact, some of the smarter Blood Elves also felt that something was wrong during the battle. They were only blinded by anger and were willing to be used. The Blood Elves who came to their senses looked at the messy Nordrassil and could not help but feel regretful. It was because they listened to the rumors that they became the culprits who caused all this. The Blood Elves cursed angrily, their eyes red. Some of them wanted to rush up and tear Keith and the others to pieces. Dobin heaved a sigh of relief. The problem that had troubled him for a while was finally solved. Elder Marlowe, who had calmed down, also understood now. He looked at Dobin apologetically and bowed deeply. "I'm sorry, Elder Dobin. We were wrong in this matter." As he spoke, he turned around again and sighed deeply. He bowed to the elves of the allied forces of the three races. At the same time, his voice spread far and wide. "I'm sorry, elves of the three races. All of this was caused by us, the Blood Elves, believing in the rumors. For this, I represent the Blood Elves to apologize to all elves." Elder Marlowe's words were powerful and resonant, and the battlefield suddenly became silent. Not long after, the Blood Elves began to write pornographic novels. Soft sobbing sounds could be heard from the crowd. They were remorseful for the serious consequences of their crazy actions. This power, why do I feel that it's so familiar? This power is. Ron stared at Keith and the other three as his body trembled uncontrollably. This was because he realized a terrifying fact. Whether it was the power, expression, or temperament of these four people, they were very similar to someone he had seen before. That was the headless corpse of the god. Please go to www.grain.com to see the first commercial-free article. Chapter 426. The faces of Keith and the others turned ugly. They didn't expect that Undine would use the power of the divine realm to force them to reveal their true forms. Now all their plans had failed. Novel ranking, Grainweb. Undine's face was cold. "Keith, what else do you have to say now?" Keith's pornographic novelty's face was full of fear. Didn't this woman's power greatly deplete because of maintaining the Chimera seal? Why was he still so strong? Seeing that Keith didn't answer, Undine's face gradually darkened. "All right, Keith, I think it's time for you to tell us the answer. Who are you people? Where did you come from? What are you trying to do by pretending to be Blood Elves?" Keith laughed, his face full of malevolence. "You silly woman, do you think I'll tell you?" Undine smiled coldly, her eyes full of murderous intent as she stared at Keith. "Since that's the case, I have nothing more to say. We elves love peace, but that doesn't mean we'll be merciful to our enemies." After he finished speaking, a powerful aura locked onto Keith and the others, pressing down on them with a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas. Faced with an unparalleled God's domain expert, Keith's expression finally changed. On the other hand, Waldron's will to fight immediately crumbled. He let out a loud cry and ran away, abandoning everyone else. Dobin was shocked. "Lord High Priestess, be careful, don't let that guy run away." Undine snorted coldly. "Don't worry, he can't run away." After saying that, she waved her dark green magic staff, and dark green natural power quickly condensed into the shape of a small bird in her palm. Undine smiled slightly and waved her hand lightly. That dark green bird in her palm was like an arrow leaving the bow, chasing after Waldron in the sky. Not long after, there was a bang sound, and brilliant fireworks bloomed in the sky, sprinkling down thousands of cyan rays of light. Not long after, there was a green light, but Waldron had already disappeared. What? Keith was shocked. In just a moment, Waldron had died a violent death. Seeing the miserable state of Nordrassil, How could such a cruel warlike scene appear in the usually peaceful elven forest? Undine's heart was filled with anger, and she showed no mercy. She smiled and stared at Keith coldly. The green bird condensed in her hand again, and she said coldly, "It's your turn now." Keith gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and forced a smile on his face. "High Priest, don't you want to know who we are? If you don't want to know where we came from, you won't know anything if you kill me." Keith's desire to save his own life finally prevailed. He smiled and said, "I'll tell you everything you want to know, but I only have one request. That is to save our lives and leave in one piece." When Undine heard this, her hand trembled slightly. She seemed to be moved. Seeing that Undine was moved, Keith added fuel to the fire. "I also know that in the near future, the Noah continent will face a catastrophe. If you are not prepared, the consequences will be disastrous. If you want to know the details, we can make this deal." Undine fell silent. "Boss, Radcliffe's expression changed when he heard this. "You can even say such things? You're betraying the army." Keith frowned and said coldly, "Radcliffe, if you lose your life, what's the point of being loyal to the army? I'm doing this for everyone's good. If you want to die, go ahead and die. I'm not stopping you." On the other side, Elder Dobin also advised, "High Priest, these guys are sinful. You must not let them go." "That's right, High Priest. These despicable guys must not be let go." Elder Marlowe also chimed in. "This is a deal. I know that you elves are a race that keeps your promises." Keith smiled and raised his eyebrows. He looked at Undine and asked, "How about it? You dare?" Radcliffe's expression became ferocious. "If you dare to betray the army, I'll be the first to kill you." Looking at Keith, Undine thought for a while and finally took a deep breath. "No need. I only know that you're not a race from the Noah continent." From what Radcliffe said, this so-called army was definitely a terrifying force. However, this was not a reason to make an exchange. The crimes that Keith committed in the Elven Forest were enough for him to die 10,000 times. Keith's expression changed drastically. He never thought that Undine would actually reject him. "I really want to know where you came from and what your purpose is. However, you've caused too much harm to the Elven race. No matter what, I can't use this to make an exchange. If you don't want to say those words, then you can keep them to yourself." Saying that, she suddenly attacked, and a powerful force blasted down on Keith. "Go to hell." Keith's expression hardened. He grabbed Radcliffe and gave him a fierce push. "Boss, you..." Radcliffe never thought that he would become Keith's sacrifice, but it was too late for him to dodge. Boom! A large amount of blood splattered in the sky. Things happened without warning. Radcliffe did not even have the thought of resisting and was directly turned into meat powder. At the same time, Keith's figure also disappeared. Damn it, that fellow actually abandoned his companions and fled. Undine fiercely stomped her foot. She glanced at the fellow called Tompkin who had come down and said, "I'll leave this person to you. I'll chase after that fellow." With that, the green figure moved and quickly chased after her. Undine had just left when the remaining Tompkin was killed by the angry elves. The chaotic situation finally calmed down. Ron, who had seen all this with his own eyes, could not help but feel admiration. A Godrealm expert was indeed powerful. She solved the problem with one move. Indeed, power was everything. This principle was applicable everywhere. "Elder Dobin, what do we do now?" Elder Marlowe asked respectfully as he walked to Dobin's side after getting rid of the last impostor, Tompkin. He was filled with guilt for everything that the Blood Elves had done. Dobin did not argue with him. Instead, he said through gritted teeth, "We'll chase after him. I have to see Keith die with my own eyes before I can be at ease. We'll listen to you. Let's go." Elder Marlowe said straightforwardly. "Let's go. We'll chase after him. Kill him." The blood elves who have been used are furious. The seal of the 56th Library of Mira. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.